At the heart of this idyllic community stood the Lawrence residence. For years, it had been a symbol of stability and refinement in Stonebridge. The Lawrence sisters, Isolde and Celeste, were fixtures of the neighborhood, known for their grace, intelligence, and the unshakable bond they shared. Isolde, the elder by 2 years, was a poised and ambitious corporate lawyer with sharp features and an even sharper wit. Her sister Celeste, a free-spirited artist, balanced Isolde's intensity with her easy charm and infectious laughter. Together, they were a formidable pair, admired and envied in equal measure by those around them. But the delicate equilibrium of Stonebridge was destined to be shattered by the arrival of one man, Alaric Thorne. With his enigmatic smile and air of worldly sophistication, Alaric moved into the long-vacant Holloway house next door to the Lawrences on a balmy June evening. Little did the residents of Stonebridge know that his presence would set in motion a chain of events that would culminate in tragedy, forever altering the fabric of their peaceful community. As the summer heat intensified, so too did the rivalry between Isolde and Celeste, their once unbreakable sisterly bond corroding under the acid of jealousy and desire. What began as playful competition would soon spiral into a deadly game, with Alaric as the unwitting prize and Stonebridge as the stage for a chilling tale of betrayal. The Lawrence family had deep roots in Stonebridge, tracing back 4 generations to the town's founding. The parents had raised their daughters, Isolde and Celeste, with a blend of old-money refinement and new-age philosophies, resulting in 2 remarkably different, yet equally captivating young women. Isolde Lawrence seemed destined for greatness from her first breath. With her father's sharp intellect and her mother's unyielding determination, Isolde excelled in everything she pursued. By the age of 32, she had already made partner at Stonebridge's most prestigious law firm, her name whispered with a mixture of admiration and trepidation in courtrooms across the state. Isolde's life was a carefully constructed edifice of achievements and accolades. Her wardrobe consisted of impeccably tailored suits. Her social calendar was filled with charity galas and networking events, and her romantic entanglements were as brief as they were calculated. To the outside world, Isolde Lawrence was the very picture of success, but those closest to her sensed an underlying current of discontent, a hunger that no professional triumph seemed able to satisfy. In contrast, Celeste Lawrence burst into the world on a midsummer's night, her arrival heralded by a spectacular thunderstorm. From childhood, Celeste possessed an ethereal quality that drew people to her like moths to a flame. Her laughter could lighten the heaviest of hearts, and her art, vibrant, emotive paintings that seemed to capture the very essence of joy, adorned galleries throughout the region. At 30, Celeste's life was a kaleidoscope of color and sensation. She flitted from one passion project to another, leaving a trail of half-finished masterpieces and broken hearts in her wake. Where Isolde was all sharp angles and cool precision, Celeste was soft curves and warm impulse. Her bohemian style and carefree attitude were at odds with Stonebridge's conservative leanings, yet somehow she made it work, charming even the most curmudgeonly of neighbors with her genuine warmth and infectious enthusiasm. Despite their differences, or perhaps because of them, Isolde and Celeste had always been inseparable. They balanced each other, Isolde providing the stability and focus that Celeste sometimes lacked, while Celeste brought a spark of spontaneity to Isolde's regimented existence. Their sisterly bond seemed unbreakable, a fact that made the events to come all the more shocking to those who knew them. As children, they had been co-conspirators in backyard adventures and shared confidants in teenage trials. As adults, they remained each other's fiercest defenders and most trusted allies. Neither sister could have imagined that anything, or anyone, could ever come between them. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. The arrival of Alaric Thorne in Stonebridge was like a stone cast into still waters, sending ripples of curiosity and excitement through the community. He appeared one day in early June, driving a sleek black Audi that purred down Maple Street with feline grace. As he emerged from the car, the neighborhood watch, a group of retirees who spent their days cataloging the comings and goings of Stonebridge from their porch swings, leaned forward in unison, eager for a glimpse of their new neighbor. Alaric did not disappoint. At 35, he cut a striking figure. There was something almost cinematic about his presence, as if he had stepped out of a noir film and into the technicolor world of Stonebridge. Rumors about Alaric's past spread through the community like wildfire. Some said he was a tech millionaire, taking a sabbatical from Silicon Valley. Others whispered that he was a novelist, seeking inspiration for his next bestseller. The truth, as it turned out, was equally intriguing. Alaric Thorne was a former war correspondent turned humanitarian aid worker who had spent the last decade hopscotching across global hotspots. Stonebridge, he claimed, was to be his refuge, a place to heal and write his memoirs. The Lawrence sisters first encountered Alaric separately, each meeting leaving an indelible impression. Isolde, out for her morning run, nearly collided with him as he emerged from the local coffee shop. Their eyes met over the rim of his steaming cup, and for a moment, Isolde felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with physical exertion. Celeste's introduction came later that same day, as she was setting up her easel in the park. Alaric, out exploring his new surroundings, stopped to admire her work. His insightful comments on her use of color left Celeste both flattered and intrigued. Tyler's sister realized, as they recounted their encounters over dinner that night, that they had just met the man who would change their lives forever. The seeds of rivalry between Isolde and Celeste were planted innocuously enough, nurtured by the subtle competition that had always existed between them. At first, their growing interest in Alaric manifested in small ways. Isolde began taking her morning runs past his house with increasing frequency, while Celeste found reasons to paint in the park near his regular walking route. As summer progressed, both sisters found themselves unconsciously vying for Alaric's attention. Isolde, typically reserved in social situations, made an effort to engage Alaric in intellectual discourse whenever they crossed paths. She regaled him with tales of her most challenging cases, her gray eyes alight with passion as she detailed the intricacies of corporate law. Alaric, to her delight, proved to be an attentive and insightful listener, often drawing parallels between her legal battles and the geopolitical conflicts he had witnessed. Celeste, meanwhile, approached Alaric with her characteristic warmth and spontaneity. She invited him to local art exhibitions, introducing him to Stonebridge's small but vibrant creative community. On lazy Sunday afternoons, she would often spot him reading on his porch and would bound over, sketchbook in hand, to share her latest inspiration or to cajole him into being her impromptu model. Alaric, for his part, seemed to genuinely enjoy the company of both sisters, oblivious to the growing tension between them. He found in Isolde a kindred intellectual spirit, someone who could match his wit and challenge his perspectives. With Celeste, he rediscovered a sense of joy and wonder that years of witnessing human suffering had nearly extinguished. The rivalry might have remained friendly, a mere undercurrent in the sisters' relationship, had it not been for the annual Stonebridge Summer Gala. The event, a black tie affair held at the town's historic mansion, was the social highlight of the season. Isolde and Celeste had always attended together, a united front amidst Stonebridge's elite. This year, however, each sister extended a separate invitation to Alaric. When Alaric arrived at the gala, looking dashing in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, the Lawrence sisters' faces fell in unison. He greeted them both warmly, seemingly unaware of the silent battle of wills taking place before him. As the evening progressed, Isolde and Celeste took turns monopolizing Alaric's attention, each trying to outshine the other. Isolde dazzled him with her knowledge of wine, guiding him through a tasting with the expertise of a seasoned sommelier. Not to be outdone, Celeste swept Alaric onto the dance floor, her natural grace making even his awkward steps seem charming. By the end of the night, a palpable tension had settled between the sisters. As they watched Alaric drive away, each lost in their own thoughts, they realized that something fundamental had shifted in their relationship. The easy camaraderie they had always shared was now tinged with an edge of competition, a silent acknowledgement that they had become rivals in the pursuit of Alaric Thorne's affections. As summer gave way to autumn, the rivalry between Isolde and Celeste intensified, their every interaction with Alaric becoming a calculated move in an increasingly complex game. The sisters, once inseparable, now found reasons to spend time apart, each hoping to encounter Alaric alone. Isolde, ever the strategist, began orchestrating chance meetings with Alaric. She adjusted her schedule to coincide with his daily routines, casually bumping into him at the local farmer's market or the quaint bookstore on Main Street. During these encounters, she would engage him in deep conversations about his experiences in war-torn countries, drawing parallels to her own battles in the courtroom. Isolde's keen intellect and sophisticated charms seemed to resonate with Alaric, and she reveled in the moments when his eyes would light up with interest at her insights. Celeste, Intuiting her sister's maneuverings countered with her own brand of seduction, she invited Alaric to impromptu picnics in the park, her basket filled with homemade delicacies that showcased her culinary skills. Under the dappled shade of oak trees, she would regale him with vivid stories of her travels through Europe's art scenes, her animated gestures and melodious laughter a stark contrast to Isolde's reserved demeanor. Celeste's free spirit and zest for life seemed to awaken something in Alaric, a yearning for the simple joys he had forgone in his years of global wandering. The competition between the sisters began to spill over into other aspects of their lives. Isolde, who had always been career-focused, suddenly took an interest in community events, volunteering for the same charitable causes that Alaric supported. Celeste, typically content with her bohemian lifestyle, started talking about getting her art into more prestigious galleries, knowing that Alaric appreciated ambition. Their friends and neighbors in Stonebridge watched this transformation with a mixture of fascination and concern. The once harmonious Lawrence sisters were now prone to thinly veiled barbs and one-upmanship, their interactions charged with an undercurrent of rivalry that was impossible to ignore. The situation came to a head at the Stonebridge Autumn Festival. Both sisters had been involved in organizing the event, each hoping to impress Alaric with their community spirit. Isolde had meticulously planned the logistics, ensuring every detail was perfect. Celeste had taken charge of the artistic elements, designing beautiful decorations that transformed the town square into a harvest wonderland. As Alaric strolled through the festival, complimenting both sisters on their hard work, Isolde and Celeste flanked him on either side, each vying for his attention. When he admired a particularly striking centerpiece, Celeste quickly claimed credit, shooting a triumphant glance at Isolde. In retaliation, Isolde smoothly steered the conversation towards the event's flawless execution, subtly highlighting her own contributions. The tension between them built throughout the evening, culminating in a heated argument behind the catering tent. Their raised voices drew concerned looks from passers-by, and even Alaric, finally noticing the strain between the sisters, attempted to intervene. His presence only served to fuel their anger, each accusing the other of trying to monopolize his time. As the festival wound down, Isolde and Celeste departed separately, their usual joint ride home abandoned. Alaric was left standing alone, a puzzled expression on his face, as he began to realize the depth of the conflict he had inadvertently sparked between the Lawrence sisters. The watershed moment in the sisters' rivalry came on a crisp October evening, during Stonebridge's annual charity auction. The event, held in the grand ballroom of the Stonebridge Country Club, was a glittering affair that drew the town's most prominent citizens. Isolde and Celeste arrived separately, each a vision in designer evening wear, their eyes scanning the crowd for a glimpse of Alaric. When Alaric finally appeared, looking debonair in a classic black tuxedo, both sisters made their move. They converged on him from opposite sides of the room, their forced smiles barely concealing their competitive intent. Alaric, now acutely aware of the tension between them, attempted to greet both equally, but the atmosphere was charged with unspoken hostility. As the auction began, Isolde and Celeste found themselves locked in a silent bidding war. The item up for bid was a weekend getaway for two at an exclusive mountain resort, an opportunity that both sisters saw as a chance to spend uninterrupted time with Alaric. The bidding started reasonably, but quickly escalated as Isolde and Celeste raised their paddles with increasing frequency. The other attendees watched in astonishment as the price soared well beyond the package's value. Alaric, realizing the bid was more about him than the prize, tried to intervene, but his protests fell on deaf ears. The sisters were too engrossed in their competition to heed his discomfort. In the end, it was Celeste who won the bid, her final offer eliciting a collective gasp from the crowd. As the auctioneer's gavel fell, Celeste turned to Isolde with a triumphant smirk, only to find her sister's face a mask of cold fury. Isolde, typically the picture of composure, was visibly shaking with rage. In that moment, something shifted in Isolde's eyes, a hardening, a darkness that sent a chill down Celeste's spine. Without a word, Isolde turned on her heel and strode out of the ballroom, leaving a wake of whispers in her path. Alaric, witnessing this exchange, finally grasped the full extent of the sisters' rivalry. He approached Celeste, his face etched with concern, and gently suggested that perhaps it would be best if he kept his distance from both of them for a while. Celeste, Her victory suddenly hollow, could only nod mutely as she watched him walk away. As the evening drew to a close, the residents of Stonebridge buzzed with speculation about the Lawrence sisters' very public falling out. Little did they know that this was merely the prelude to a much darker chapter in the sisters' story. In the days following the charity auction, Isolde retreated into herself, her usual routines abandoned in favor of long hours spent alone in her home office. To the outside world, it appeared that she was merely nursing her wounded pride. But within the confines of her mind, a sinister plan was taking shape. Isolde had always prided herself on her self-control, her ability to compartmentalize emotions and approach problems with cool logic. But the humiliation of losing to Celeste, coupled with the fear of losing Alaric, had cracked her carefully constructed facade. For the first time in her life, Isolde found herself entertaining thoughts that both thrilled and terrified her. At first, these thoughts were relatively innocuous, fantasies of Celeste falling ill or encountering some minor misfortune that would keep her away from Alaric. But as the days wore on, fueled by sleepless nights and an increasing sense of desperation, Isolde's imagination took a darker turn. She began to contemplate scenarios in which Celeste was permanently removed from the equation. These thoughts, initially shocking in their intensity, gradually became more palatable as Isolde's mind worked to justify them. She convinced herself that Celeste had always been the favored sister, the one who effortlessly captured attention and affection, while Isolde had to work tirelessly for every scrap of recognition. In her distorted reasoning, Isolde began to see Celeste not just as a rival for Alaric's affections, but as the embodiment of everything she had ever resented in life. Every setback, every disappointment, every moment of self-doubt, Isolde now attributed them all to Celeste's mere existence. The turning point came on a rain-soaked evening, as Isolde sat in her darkened living room, a glass of wine in hand. Through the window, she caught sight of Celeste and Alaric, sharing an umbrella as they walked down the street, their heads bent close in intimate conversation. Something snapped inside Isolde at that moment. The last vestiges of sisterly affection crumbled away, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. It was then that the idea of an accident first took root in Isolde's mind, an unfortunate incident that would rid her of Celeste once and for all, leaving the path to Alaric clear. As lightning illuminated the room, Isolde allowed herself a small, chilling smile. She was, after all, an expert in constructing airtight cases. Surely she could craft the perfect crime. With the decision made, Isolde threw herself into planning with the same meticulous attention to detail that had made her such a formidable lawyer. She approached the task of eliminating her sister with the clinical detachment of a chess player, plotting several moves ahead. Her first step was to establish an alibi. Isolde began to cultivate a more visible presence in the community, volunteering at the local animal shelter and joining a book club. She made a point of being seen and heard, creating a network of witnesses who could vouch for her whereabouts and character. Simultaneously, she embarked on a careful study of Celeste's routines. Under the guise of reconciliation, Isolde began to spend more time with her sister, noting her habits, her schedule, and most importantly, her vulnerabilities. She paid particular attention to Celeste's daily jog through Stonebridge Park, a solitary ritual that Celeste had maintained for years. Isolde's research extended beyond her sister. She spent hours poring over medical journals and forensic reports, learning about accidents that could appear natural, yet be orchestrated. She became an expert in the effects of various substances, their detectability, and their ability to mimic natural causes of death. To cover her tracks, Isolde used public computers at the local library to conduct her more questionable searches, always careful to clear the browsing history afterward. She made discreet purchases from different stores across town, accumulating the material she would need without raising suspicion. As her plan crystallized, Isolde encountered several close calls that threatened to derail her scheme. Once, while she was mixing a concoction in her garage, a neighbor dropped by unexpectedly. Isolde managed to conceal her work just in time, her heart pounding as she chatted casually over coffee. Another time, Celeste nearly discovered a notebook where Isolde had jotted down some incriminating notes. Isolde managed to snatch it away, passing it off as a draft for a sensitive legal case. The incident served as a stark reminder of the need for absolute caution. Despite these near misses, Isolde's resolve never wavered. If anything, the close calls only served to sharpen her focus and refine her plan. She became adept at maintaining a facade of normalcy, playing the role of the dutiful sister and respected community member while secretly orchestrating Celeste's demise. As weeks turned into months, Isolde's plan evolved into an intricately woven tapestry of deception and calculation. Every detail was accounted for, every possibility considered and recalculated. In her mind, it was no longer a question of if she would act, but when. The opportunity Isolde had been waiting for finally presented itself on the eve of Stonebridge's annual marathon, an event in which Celeste had enthusiastically participated for years. With a sense of grim satisfaction, Isolde realized that the stage was set for her carefully choreographed accident to unfold. The morning of the Stonebridge Marathon dawned bright and clear, a perfect day for running. Isolde awoke early, her nerves humming with a mixture of anticipation and dread. She went through her morning routine with mechanical precision, each action carefully planned to establish her alibi. At 7:30 a.m., Isolde arrived at the marathon starting line clipboard in hand. She had volunteered as a race coordinator months ago, securing herself a visible role in the day's events. She greeted fellow volunteers with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, her gaze constantly scanning the growing crowd for a glimpse of Celeste. Celeste arrived at 8:15 a.m. She waved enthusiastically at Isolde, any lingering tension between them seemingly forgotten in the pre-race atmosphere. Isolde waved back, her stomach churning as she thought of what was to come. As Celeste warmed up, Isolde made her way to the water station at the 5-mile mark, where she had been assigned to distribute refreshments to the runners. This position was crucial to her plan. It allowed her to be seen by numerous witnesses, while still giving her access to the race route. The starting gun fired at 9 a.m. sharp. Isolde watched the sea of runners surge forward, her eyes fixed on Celeste's retreating form. Then, with a deep breath, she turned her attention to her duties, handing out cups of water with mechanical efficiency. At 9:47 a.m., Isolde excused herself, citing a need for a bathroom break. Instead, she hurried to a secluded spot along the race route, just before a sharp turn that led into a wooded area. Here, she retrieved a small vial from her pocket and carefully spread its contents, a nearly invisible, highly slippery substance, across a patch of the path. Returning to her post, Isolde resumed her role, her heart racing as she awaited Celeste's approach. At 10:23 a.m., she spotted her sister rounding the bend towards the water station. Celeste was making good time, her face set in determination as she reached for a cup. Their eyes met for a brief moment, as Isolde handed Celeste the water. In that instant, a flicker of doubt passed through Isolde's mind, a last vestige of sisterly affection crying out in protest. But it was too late to turn back now. Celeste continued on, oblivious to what lay ahead. Isolde watched, her breath caught in her throat as her sister approached the treacherous patch of ground. Time seemed to slow as Celeste's foot made contact with the slippery surface. The accident unfolded exactly as Isolde had planned. Celeste's foot slid, her ankle twisting at an unnatural angle. Her momentum carried her forward, sending her careening off the path and down a steep embankment. The sound of breaking branches and a muffled cry echoed through the woods, followed by an ominous silence. For a moment, Isolde stood frozen, the reality of what she had done crashing over her. Then, snapping back to her senses, she raised the alarm, her anguished cries for help convincingly real. As fellow volunteers and paramedics rushed to the scene, Isolde played the part of the distraught sister to perfection, her eyes brimming with tears that were not entirely feigned. As Celeste's motionless form was carefully lifted onto a stretcher, Isolde felt a strange mix of horror and relief. The deed was done. Now, all that remained was to see her plan through to its bitter end. The news of Celeste Lawrence's tragic accident sent shockwaves through Stonebridge. The vibrant artist, beloved by many, had suffered severe head trauma and multiple fractures in her fall. She lingered in a coma for 3 days before succumbing to her injuries, leaving the community in mourning and disbelief. The initial investigation into Celeste's death was cursory. Given the public nature of the event and the presence of numerous witnesses, the police were inclined to view it as a tragic accident. Isolde's performance as the grief-stricken sister was flawless, her composed exterior cracking just enough to reveal glimpses of raw emotion that seemed genuine to all who saw her. In the days following Celeste's funeral, a somber affair attended by what seemed like the entire town, Isolde threw herself into managing her sister's estate. She handled the tasks with her usual efficiency, all the while playing the role of the bereaved sibling to perfection. The first thread in Isolda's carefully woven tapestry of deception came loose 6 months after Celeste's death. Amelia Thornton, a junior associate at Isolda's law firm, was tasked with organizing old case files when she stumbled upon a peculiar notebook hidden among Isolda's papers. Curiosity piqued. Amelia flipped through the pages, her eyes widening as she realized the sinister nature of its contents. The notebook contained detailed notes on various poisons and their effects, along with what appeared to be a meticulously planned timeline. While no names were mentioned, the final date corresponded chillingly with the day of Celeste's fatal accident. Unsure of what to do with this information, Amelia confided in her boyfriend, Detective Lucas Reeves. Reeves, a by-the-book officer who had always felt uneasy about the quick resolution of Celeste's case, saw this as an opportunity to reopen the investigation. He began by quietly re-examining the evidence, paying particular attention to details that had been overlooked in the initial inquiry. A breakthrough came when Reeves interviewed Martin Holloway, a retired chemist who lived near the accident site. Holloway recalled seeing Isolde near the wooded area shortly before Celeste's fall, despite Isolde's insistence that she had been at the water station the entire time. This discrepancy, coupled with the suspicious notebook, was enough for Reeves to dig deeper. As the investigation progressed, more inconsistencies in Isolde's story came to light. Security camera footage from a nearby convenience store showed Isolde purchasing unusual combinations of chemicals in the weeks leading up to the marathon. A forensic re-examination of Celeste's running shoes revealed traces of an artificial polymer designed to reduce friction, a substance that had no business being on a running trail. Perhaps the most damning piece of evidence came from an unexpected source. Alaric Thorne, racked with guilt over his role in the sisters' rivalry, came forward with a series of text messages from Isolde. The messages, sent in the heat of their competition for his affections, revealed a level of animosity towards Celeste that bordered on obsession. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, the true picture of what had transpired on that fateful day began to emerge. Isolde's carefully constructed alibi began to crumble under the weight of mounting evidence. The final nail in the coffin came during a search of Isolde's home office. Hidden behind a false panel in her desk, detectives discovered a vial containing traces of the same polymer found on Celeste's shoes, along with a series of detailed notes outlining the plan to stage an accident during the marathon. Faced with the overwhelming evidence against her, Isolde's composure finally shattered. In a moment of desperation, she attempted to flee, leading police on a tense car chase through the streets of Stonebridge. The pursuit ended at the very spot where Celeste had fallen, with Isolde's car skidding off the road in a cruel twist of irony. As she was led away in handcuffs, the mask of the grieving sister fell away completely. The residents of Stonebridge watched in shock as Isolde Lawrence, once a pillar of their community, was revealed to be the architect of her own sister's demise. The arrest and subsequent confession of Isolde Lawrence sent shockwaves through Stonebridge, shattering the town's idyllic image and forcing its residents to confront the darkness that had lurked beneath the surface of their community. The courtroom drama unfolded like a twisted mirror image of Isolde's legal career, with the once respected lawyer now sitting at the defendant's table. Her impassioned plea of temporary insanity, citing the extreme emotional stress of her rivalry with Celeste, fell on deaf ears. The jury, comprised of many who had once admired her, took less than a day to return a guilty verdict. She was sentenced to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. Spencer Howard was a man who seemed to have it all. Born into one of Fairview's oldest families, he had inherited not just wealth, but also a legacy of civic responsibility. Spencer had taken the reins of the family business after graduating from Dartmouth with honors. Spencer cut an impressive figure in his tailored suits. He was known for his philanthropy, chairing the town's annual charity gala and serving on the board of the local hospital. To the outside world, Spencer appeared to be the very picture of success and respectability. Yet those closest to him saw glimpses of a different man. His assistant, Bethany, noted his increasing distraction over the past year. His golf buddies at the country club commented on his sudden cancellations and vague excuses, and his wife, Laura, had confided in her sister about the growing distance between them. Reed Foster, on the other hand, was just beginning to carve out his place in the world. The son of Laura from her first marriage, Reed had moved with his mother when she married Spencer 7 years ago. Initially a sullen teenager struggling to adjust to small-town life after growing up in Boston, Reed had blossomed in recent years. Reed was popular among his peers. He had just started his junior year at the local community college, studying environmental science. His professors praised his passion and dedication, particularly his work on a project to restore the town's polluted river. Reed's transformation from a troubled teen to a promising young adult had been a source of pride for his mother and, outwardly at least, for his stepfather Spencer. Friends recalled seeing them together at the farmers' market on weekends, chatting animatedly about organic farming practices, but beneath the surface of this seemingly ordinary family dynamic lay currents of tension and desire that would ultimately lead to tragedy. As Detective Sawyer began to piece together the lives of Spencer and Reed, she would uncover a relationship far more complex and intimate than anyone could have imagined. As the early morning mist began to dissipate, Detective Sawyer took charge of the crime scene. Her first order of business was to secure the area and ensure that no evidence was contaminated. She instructed officers to set up a wider perimeter, keeping curious onlookers and the quickly assembling news vans at bay. Sawyer's keen eyes scanned the exterior of the house, noting the absence of any signs of forced entry. The manicured lawn and well-tended flower beds showed no signs of a struggle or hasty exit. Whatever had transpired, it seemed to have been contained within the walls of the Howard home. Donning protective gear, Sawyer entered the house, the scent of copper and something else, fear perhaps, hanging heavy in the air. She made her way to the study, where the bodies had been discovered. The room, with its dark wood paneling and leather-bound books, spoke of old money and tradition. Now it was a tableau of violence. Spencer lay sprawled across his antique desk, a crystal tumbler shattered on the floor beside him. Reed's body was crumpled near the fireplace, arm outstretched as if reaching for something, or someone. Both men were clad only in robes, an odd detail that Sawyer filed away for later consideration. As the forensics team began their meticulous work, photographing and cataloging every detail, Sawyer turned her attention to the rest of the house. She noted the untouched breakfast dishes in the sink, the 2 empty wine glasses on the coffee table in the living room, the rumpled sheets on the bed in the master bedroom. Each seemingly mundane detail could be a crucial piece of the puzzle. Sawyer knew that the key to solving this case lay not just in the physical evidence, but in understanding the complex dynamics of the Howard household. She would need to delve deep into the lives of Spencer, Reed, and Laura to uncover the truth behind this shocking crime. With a nod to her team, Sawyer stepped out onto the front porch. It was time to begin the interviews that would unravel the tangled web of the Howard family's secrets. Spencer and Laura's marriage had been the talk of town 7 years ago. Laura Fosterson, a divorced mother of 1, had swept into town like a breath of fresh air, capturing the heart of the town's most eligible bachelor. Their whirlwind romance culminated in a lavish wedding at the Howard family estate, with the whole town in attendance. Laura, with her vivacious personality and philanthropic interests, seemed the perfect match for Spencer. She threw herself into the role of society wife with gusto, chairing committees and hosting dinner parties. Yet those closest to the couple noticed the strain that began to show in recent years. Laura's sister, Audrey, later told investigators that Laura had confided in her about feeling increasingly isolated in her marriage. Spencer, for his part, had initially embraced his role as stepfather to young Reed. He had taken the boy fishing, attended his soccer games, and even hired tutors to help him improve his grades. But as Reed grew older, the dynamic between stepfather and stepson began to shift in ways that made some observers uncomfortable. Reed's childhood friend recounted an incident from their senior year of high school. She had stopped by the Howard house to pick up Reed for a study session and found him and Spencer in what appeared to be an intense conversation in the study. When they noticed her presence, both had jumped apart, looking flustered. At the time, Zoe had dismissed it as an argument, but in hindsight, she wondered if there had been more to the scene. As Reed matured into a handsome young man, bearing a striking resemblance to his biological father, the tension in the household seemed to increase. Laura, once so close to her son, found herself increasingly shut out of his life. She confided in friends that Reed and Spencer seemed to have their own private world, filled with inside jokes and shared interests that excluded her. The household staff, discreet as they were, couldn't help but notice changes in the family dynamic. The housekeeper, Mrs. Abernathy, recalled overhearing hushed arguments between Laura and Spencer, with Reed's name mentioned more than once. She also noted that Reed had taken to spending more time at the house rather than going out with friends, often sequestered in the study with Spencer for hours on end. As Detective Sawyer pieced together these fragments of the Howard family life, she began to see the outline of a story far more complex than a simple domestic dispute. As the investigation progressed, Detective Sawyer and her team began to peel back the layers of secrecy surrounding the Howard family. Their first breakthrough came from an unexpected source: the family's smart home system. Tech Specialist Officer Ravi Patel discovered that the house's security cameras, while not covering the interior spaces, had captured some intriguing footage. On the night of the murders, the exterior cameras showed Laura leaving the house at 7:30 p.m., her posture tense and movements hurried. More significantly, the cameras never recorded her return. This discovery led Sawyer to dig deeper into the digital lives of the victims. With a warrant in hand, she tasked Patel with examining the computers and phones belonging to Spencer and Reed. What they found was a treasure trove of hidden communications. On Spencer's work computer, buried deep in encrypted files, was a folder labeled Investments. But instead of financial documents, it contained hundreds of photos of Reed, some innocent, others far more intimate. There were also logs of text conversations between Spencer and Reed, dating back nearly 2 years, filled with coded language and veiled references to secret meetings. Reed's phone yielded even more damning evidence. Hidden behind a secure app disguised as a calculator were dozens of voice messages from Spencer. In these recordings, Spencer's usually confident voice was soft, almost vulnerable as he professed his love for Reed and his torment over their forbidden relationship. As news of these discoveries spread through the police department, officers who had known Spencer for years were left reeling. How could the man they thought they knew, a pillar of the community, a devoted husband, a caring stepfather, have been living such a double life? Witness testimonies began to take on new meaning in light of these revelations. Zoe Lawson's account of the tense scene she had witnessed years ago now seemed like a possible close call, a near discovery of the illicit relationship. Mrs. Abernathy's recollections of hushed arguments and long hours spent in the study painted a picture of a household teetering on the brink of implosion. But perhaps the most chilling piece of evidence came from Reed's best friend, Axel Rodriguez. In a tearful interview, Axel revealed that Reed had confided in him just a week before his death. Reed had been planning to end things with Spencer, saying he couldn't live with the guilt anymore. He had even mentioned the possibility of telling his mother everything. As Detective Sawyer compiled this mountain of evidence, she couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. The secrets unearthed painted a picture of a family torn apart by forbidden passion and looming exposure. But they still didn't answer the most pressing question: who had killed Spencer and Reed, and why? The first hints of their forbidden attraction could be traced back to a family vacation in the Bahamas. A series of text messages following the trip revealed a growing emotional intimacy between stepfather and stepson, filled with inside jokes and veiled references. Their physical relationship seemed to have started a few months later, coinciding with a period when Laura was away on a 2-week charity mission in Haiti. Spencer and Reed's messages during this time were laden with anticipation and, later, expressions of guilt mixed with declarations of undeniable attraction. From that point on, the affair was conducted with meticulous care to avoid detection. They communicated primarily through encrypted apps, used code words to arrange meetings, and took advantage of Laura's frequent charity engagements to spend time together. Spencer went to great lengths to create opportunities for intimacy. He began working from home more often, citing a need for quiet to focus on important projects. He encouraged Reed to take online classes, ostensibly to save money on commuting, but effectively keeping him closer to home. He even renovated the study, adding soundproofing under the guise of creating a better work environment. To the outside world, their closeness was explained as a heartwarming example of a stepdad and stepson bonding. Spencer took Reed to exclusive social events, introducing him to influential people in the guise of mentorship. But there were close calls. Once, Laura had nearly walked in on them in a compromising position, saved only by the creak of a floorboard that gave them a moment's warning. Another time, a housemaid had found one of Reed's shirts in Spencer's study and questioned its presence, leading Spencer to hastily explain it away as laundry he was planning to donate. As the affair progressed, both Spencer and Reed became increasingly skilled at leading double lives. They maintained their public personas, Spencer the respected businessman and community leader, Reed the promising student and environmental activist, while nurturing their secret passion behind closed doors. But as with all secrets, the weight of their deception was beginning to take its toll, setting the stage for the tragedy that was to come. As the investigation continued, Detective Sawyer turned her attention to Laura Howard. The grieving widow and mother had initially been treated as a victim, but the revelation of the affair between her husband and son cast her in a new light. Sawyer needed to scrutinize Laura's alibi for the night of the murders. Laura claimed she had been at a charity event in Burlington, about an hour's drive from Fairview, on the night in question. She stated that she had left home around 7:30 p.m., attended the gala until midnight, and then stayed overnight at the home of her friend, Cordelia Westbrook, returning to Fairview the following morning to discover the tragic scene. On the surface, her story seemed to check out. Several attendees at the charity gala confirmed seeing Laura there, elegantly dressed and seemingly in good spirits. Cordelia Westbrook corroborated Laura's account of staying the night at her house. However, as Sawyer dug deeper, inconsistencies began to emerge. While Laura had indeed been seen at the gala, no one could confirm her presence after 10:30 p.m. The event photographer's images showed her in the background of several shots early in the evening, but she was noticeably absent from later pictures. Furthermore, cell phone tower data revealed that Laura's phone had pinged off a tower just outside Fairview at 11:45 p.m., contradicting her claim of being in Burlington at that time. When confronted with this information, Laura became flustered, claiming she must have forgotten her phone in the car. Cordelia Westbrook's statement, too, began to unravel under scrutiny. While she maintained that Laura had stayed the night, she couldn't provide any specific details about their interactions that evening or the following morning. These discrepancies in Laura's alibi raised red flags for Sawyer. What had really happened on the night of the murders, and where had Laura Howard truly been? As Detective Sawyer pieced together the events of that fateful night, a chilling narrative began to emerge. Through a combination of forensic evidence, witness statements, and digital footprints, she reconstructed the final hours of Spencer Howard and Reed Foster. The day had begun like any other. Spencer had gone to his office in the morning, while Reed attended classes at the community college. They had exchanged several texts throughout the day, their messages a mix of mundane chat and coded references to their secret relationship. Laura had spent the afternoon preparing for the charity gala, her movements around the house captured by the smart home system. At 7:30 p.m., she left for what she claimed was the event. The exterior cameras recorded her departure, her designer gown glittering in the fading light. Neighbors reported seeing Reed's car pull into the driveway around 8:15 p.m. The smart home system logged the front door opening and closing at 8:17 p.m. From there, the digital breadcrumbs became more scarce but no less telling. At 8:30 p.m., the system recorded music beginning to play in the study, a jazz playlist that both Spencer and Reed favored. The volume was turned up higher than usual, a detail that would later prove significant. Mrs. Abernathy, who lived in the guest house on the property, recalled hearing muffled voices and laughter from the main house around 9 p.m. when she stepped out to water her plants. She thought nothing of it at the time, assuming Spencer was entertaining a business associate. The last digital trace of normalcy came at 9:45 p.m., when Spencer's phone logged a search for a recipe for old-fashioned cocktails. After that, an eerie digital silence fell over the house. It was what happened in the next 2 hours that Sawyer and her team struggled to piece together. The forensic evidence painted a gruesome picture. Both Spencer and Reed had died from multiple stab wounds, but the attacks had occurred in different parts of the study. Spencer was found at his desk, suggesting he had been taken by surprise. Reed, on the other hand, was found near the fireplace, indicating he might have tried to flee or defend himself. The murder weapon, a letter opener from Spencer's desk, was found wiped clean of prints and discarded in the wastebasket. The killer had been methodical, taking time to clean up some of the blood spatter, though they had clearly been interrupted before they could complete the task. Most intriguingly, traces of DNA that didn't belong to either victim were found under Reed's fingernails, suggesting a struggle. This DNA was in the process of being analyzed, but Sawyer had a sinking feeling she knew whose it would turn out to be. The smart home system logged the front door opening and closing again at 11:52 p.m. This coincided with the cell tower ping from Laura's phone just outside of the area. As Sawyer stared at the timeline she had constructed, she couldn't shake the image of Laura Howard, still in her glittering gala gown, stepping back into her home to confront her husband and son. What had she seen? What had driven her to such a violent act? And how had she managed to attend part of the charity event and still return home in time to commit the murders? The answers, Sawyer suspected, lay in the complex web of lies, love, and betrayal that had ensnared the Howard family. As news of the murders spread through residents, the community reeled in shock. The Howard family had been a cornerstone of local society for generations, and the brutal nature of the crimes seemed at odds with the town's peaceful facade. The turning point in the investigation came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. 2 weeks after the murders, Detective Sawyer was reviewing security footage from businesses along the route for the umpteenth time when she noticed something odd. A gas station camera had captured Laura's distinctive red sports car pulling in at 10:15 p.m. on the night of the murders. The timestamp conflicted with Laura's claim of being at the charity gala at that time. More importantly, the footage showed Laura emerging from her car in a state of obvious distress, her elegant gown replaced by a nondescript sweatsuit. Armed with this new evidence, Sawyer obtained a warrant to search Laura's car. The forensics team combed through the vehicle, finding traces of blood in the trunk that matched both Spencer and Reed. Hidden under the spare tire, they discovered a plastic bag containing the gala gown, stained with blood and hastily stuffed away. But the most damning piece of evidence was found in the car's navigation system. It had recorded a route from the charity gala location in Burlington back to Fairview, with a timestamp indicating Laura had left the event much earlier than she had claimed. Confronted with this evidence, Laura's carefully constructed alibi began to crumble. In a tense interrogation, she finally broke down and confessed to the murders. Through tears, Laura revealed that she had suspected the affair between her husband and son for months, but had been in denial. On the night of the gala, she had forgotten her phone and returned home to retrieve it, only to hear sounds coming from the study. Peering through a crack in the door, she had witnessed an intimate moment between Spencer and Reed that confirmed her worst fears. In a state of shock and rage, Laura had quietly left the house and driven to the gala, forcing herself to make an appearance. But as the evening wore on, her emotions overwhelmed her. She left the event early, changed into clothes she kept in her car for emergencies, and returned home to confront Spencer and Reed. The confrontation had quickly escalated into violence. In her fury, Laura had grabbed the letter opener from Spencer's desk and attacked them both. The act had been one of temporary insanity, she claimed, a moment of blind rage at the betrayal she had suffered. With Laura's confession, the case seemed solved. But for Detective Sawyer, the tragedy of the Howard family was far from over. The ripple effects of this crime would be felt in Fairview for years to come. The arrest of Laura Howard sent shockwaves through Fairview. On a crisp morning in early November, residents watched in stunned silence as Detective Sawyer led the woman they had known as a philanthropist and socialite out of the police station in handcuffs. As the date of the trial approached, both the prosecution and defense teams worked tirelessly to build their cases. In her opening statement, District Attorney painted a vivid picture of a woman consumed by jealousy and rage, meticulously planning and executing the murders of her husband and son. She promised the jury that the evidence would show Laura's actions were calculated and deliberate. Jameson Whitaker, in his opening remarks, countered with a portrayal of Laura as a loving wife and mother, whose world had been shattered by an unthinkable betrayal. He asked the jury to consider the immense psychological toll of discovering such a transgression within one's own family. As the trial progressed, a parade of witnesses took the stand. Forensic experts detailed the brutal nature of the attacks, their clinical descriptions causing several jurors to blanch. Detective Sawyer testified about the investigation, her measured responses belying the emotional toll the case had taken on her. The most dramatic moment came when Cordelia Westbrook, Laura's friend and alibi, took the stand. Under intense cross-examination, Cordelia broke down and admitted that Laura had asked her to lie about the night she spent at her house. The revelation sent murmurs rippling through the courtroom, but it was Laura's own testimony that captivated the courtroom. Taking the stand against her lawyer's advice, she spoke in a quiet, trembling voice about the night she discovered Spencer and Reed together. She described the shock, the disbelief, and then the all-consuming rage that had overtaken her. Tears streamed down her face as she recounted the moment she had picked up the letter opener, claiming she had only meant to confront them but lost control. Her anguished description of stabbing the two people she had loved most in the world left many in the courtroom, including some jurors, visibly moved. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned to the packed courtroom. On the charge of first-degree murder for Spencer Howard, the jury found Laura guilty. On the charge of first-degree murder for Reed Foster, the jury found Laura guilty. She sentenced Laura Howard to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As Laura was led away, the Howard family tragedy came to its legal conclusion. But for the town and all those involved, the repercussions would be felt for years to come. At the center of this tragic story were 3 individuals whose lives became inextricably intertwined. Oliver Holbrook, a charismatic local businessman, Taylor Tanner, a devoted elementary school teacher, and Claire Reeves, a newcomer with a mysterious past. Their fates collided in a perfect storm of desire, jealousy, and deceit that would leave 2 of them dead and the third forever changed. Oliver Holbrook was born and raised in Millbrook, the only child of Robert and Elizabeth Holbrook. From an early age, it was clear that Oliver was destined for success. His father, a prominent local attorney, instilled in him a strong work ethic and an unwavering ambition. His mother, a former beauty queen turned socialite, taught him the art of charm and social grace. Growing up, Oliver excelled in both academics and athletics. He was captain of the high school football team, president of the student council, and valedictorian of his graduating class. After high school, Oliver attended an Ivy League university where he studied business and economics. But there was another side to Oliver Holbrook, one that few people saw. Behind his winning smile and easy charm lay a calculating mind and an insatiable hunger for control. He was a master manipulator, skilled at identifying people's weaknesses and exploiting them for his own gain. In both business and his personal life, Oliver viewed relationships as transactions, always looking for what he could get out of them. Despite his success, Oliver was never satisfied. He craved constant validation and attention, a need that manifested in a string of romantic conquests. He was known as a ladies' man, leaving a trail of broken hearts in his wake. But as he approached his mid-30s, Oliver began to feel the pressure to settle down, at least outwardly. He knew that having a wife would enhance his image as a respectable businessman and pillar of the community. It was with this mindset that Oliver entered into relationships with both Taylor Tanner and Claire Reeves. In Taylor, he saw the perfect candidate for the role of Mrs. Holbrook, attractive, well-liked, and from a good family. Claire, on the other hand, represented excitement and passion, a secret indulgence he had no intention of giving up. Little did Oliver know that his carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down, set in motion by the very women he thought he could control. Taylor Tanner was the epitome of the girl next door. Born and raised in Millbrook, she was the middle child in a family of 5, with 2 older brothers and 2 younger sisters. Her parents, Michael and Linda Tanner, were pillars of the community. Her father was the town's beloved family doctor, and her mother was a longtime volunteer at the local animal shelter. Taylor's childhood was marked by warmth and stability. The Tanner household was always bustling with activity, filled with laughter, and the aroma of her mother's home-cooked meals. This nurturing environment shaped Taylor into a compassionate and empathetic young woman, always ready to lend a helping hand or a listening ear to those in need. Upon completing her degree, Taylor secured a position teaching 3rd grade at Millbrook Elementary School. It was at a local charity event, organized to raise funds for the school's new library, that Taylor first met Oliver Holbrook. She was immediately drawn to his charisma and confident demeanor. Their courtship was a whirlwind romance that seemed plucked from the pages of a fairy tale. Oliver wooed Taylor with grand gestures, surprise weekend getaways, lavish gifts, and romantic dinners at upscale restaurants. For Taylor, who had always led a relatively simple life, the attention was intoxicating. She fell deeply in love, believing she had found her soulmate. Claire Reeves arrived in Millbrook like a gust of wind, stirring up the quiet town with her mysterious past and alluring presence. Unlike Taylor and Oliver, Claire was an outsider, having grown up in a series of foster homes across the state of New York. Her childhood was marked by instability and loneliness, experiences that shaped her into a complex and often unpredictable adult. Born to a teenage mother who struggled with addiction, Claire was placed in the foster care system at the age of 3. Over the next 15 years, she bounced from one home to another, never staying in one place long enough to form lasting connections. This transient lifestyle left Claire with a deep-seated fear of abandonment and a desperate need for love and acceptance. Despite the challenges of her upbringing, Claire was fiercely intelligent and ambitious. She excelled in school, using her studies as an escape from the chaos of her personal life. Her academic success eventually earned her a scholarship to a prestigious university in New York City, where she studied psychology. After graduation, Claire worked as a marketing executive in Manhattan for several years. She was successful in her career, but her personal life was a series of short-lived, tumultuous relationships. Each failed romance left her feeling more empty and desperate for connection. It was in the wake of a particularly painful breakup that Claire decided to leave the city behind and start fresh. She had inherited a modest sum of money from a former foster mother who had shown her particular kindness, and she used this windfall to buy a small cottage on the outskirts of Millbrook. Claire was drawn to the town's picturesque charm and the promise of a simpler life. Upon her arrival in Millbrook, Claire quickly caught the attention of the locals. Her striking looks and big city sophistication made her stand out in the small town. She found work as a consultant for local businesses, using her marketing expertise to help them expand their reach. It was at one of these consulting jobs that Claire first encountered Oliver Holbrook. The attraction between them was immediate and electric. In Oliver, Claire saw everything she had ever wanted: success, stability, and the promise of love. For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to hope for a happy ending. As Claire and Oliver began their clandestine affair, she convinced herself that she had finally found her place in the world. She threw herself into the relationship with the desperation of someone who had never known true belonging. However, Claire's fragile sense of security would soon be shattered by the revelation of Oliver's engagement to Taylor. This betrayal would trigger all of Claire's deepest fears and insecurities, setting in motion a tragic chain of events that would leave an indelible mark on the town of Millbrook. As summer turned to fall in Millbrook, the lives of Oliver, Taylor, and Claire became increasingly entangled in a complex web of desire, deceit, and jealousy. Oliver, ever the skilled manipulator, carefully navigated his relationships with both women, feeding each of them just enough attention and affection to keep them invested. With Taylor, Oliver played the role of the devoted fiancé. He attended local events by her side, charmed her family at Sunday dinners, and made grand plans for their future together. Taylor basked in the glow of their engagement, excitedly sharing details of their upcoming wedding with anyone who would listen. Meanwhile, Oliver's encounters with Claire took place in the shadows. They met in out-of-the-way restaurants in neighboring towns, or at Claire's secluded cottage. During these stolen moments, Oliver showered Claire with the passion and intensity that he carefully held back from Taylor. He fed Claire's hopes with vague promises of a future together, always with the caveat that he needed time to handle things with Taylor. As the weeks passed, tension began to build between Taylor and Claire. Even though Taylor remained unaware of the true nature of Claire's relationship with Oliver, the two women often found themselves at the same local events, with Claire's presence invariably drawing Oliver's attention away from his fiancée. Taylor, trusting and naive, initially tried to befriend Claire. Sensing the newcomer's loneliness, she invited Claire to girls' nights out and community functions, unwittingly providing more opportunities for Oliver and Claire to cross paths. Claire, consumed by her feelings for Oliver and racked with guilt over betraying Taylor's friendly overtures, became increasingly volatile. Her behavior swung between overly solicitous towards Taylor and barely concealed hostility. These mood swings did not go unnoticed by the townspeople, who began to speculate about the source of Claire's apparent instability. Oliver observed the growing friction between the two women, with a mixture of anxiety and satisfaction. While he worried about his carefully constructed double life unraveling, he also reveled in the knowledge that two beautiful women were competing for his affections. As autumn progressed, and the date of Oliver and Taylor's wedding drew nearer, the situation became increasingly untenable. Claire's demands for Oliver to leave Taylor grew more frequent and desperate, while Taylor remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around her. Little did any of them know that their actions over the next few months would shatter the peaceful facade of Millbrook and change their lives forever. On a crisp October morning, the day of Oliver and Taylor's wedding arrived. The entire town of Millbrook seemed to be in attendance, filling the picturesque white church to capacity. Taylor, radiant in a classic white gown, walked down the aisle on her father's arm, her face beaming with joy and love. Oliver stood at the altar, outwardly the picture of a happy groom, but those who knew him well might have noticed a flicker of unease in his eyes, a tension in his shoulders that belied his calm exterior. As he recited his vows, promising to love and cherish Taylor for all eternity, his thoughts couldn't help but stray to Claire. Unbeknownst to the happy couple and their guests, Claire was outside the church, hidden from view but close enough to hear the ceremony. Each word of love and devotion that echoed from within the building was like a dagger to her heart. As the church bells rang out, signaling the completion of the ceremony, Claire felt something inside her snap. The reception that followed was a joyous affair, with the entire town celebrating the union of two of its most beloved residents. Taylor danced and laughed, surrounded by friends and family, while Oliver played his role to perfection, ever the charming and attentive new husband. But as the night wore on and the champagne flowed freely, Oliver found his mask slipping. More than once, Taylor caught him staring off into the distance, a troubled expression on his face. When she asked what was wrong, he brushed off her concerns with a quick smile and a kiss. As the newlyweds drove off to their honeymoon, tin cans rattling behind their car and well wishes ringing in their ears, neither of them could have imagined the dark turn their lives were about to take. For in the shadows, Claire Reeves was already plotting her revenge. In the weeks following Oliver and Taylor's wedding, Claire Reeves spiraled into a pit of despair and obsession. The life she had imagined for herself, a future with Oliver, had been snatched away, leaving her feeling betrayed and discarded. Her fragile psyche, already damaged by years of abandonment and instability, began to fracture under the weight of her grief and anger. At first, Claire tried to move on. She threw herself into her work, taking on more consulting projects than ever before. She attempted to socialize, accepting invitations to local gatherings and community events. But everywhere she went, she was confronted with reminders of Oliver and Taylor's happiness. The newlyweds were the talk of the town, their smiling faces seeming to mock Claire at every turn. As her pain deepened, Claire's behavior became increasingly erratic. She started showing up late to meetings or missing them entirely. Her appearance, once impeccable, grew disheveled. Concerned neighbors reported seeing her wandering the streets late at night, muttering to herself. But it was Claire's growing obsession with Taylor that truly marked her descent into madness. She began stalking the young teacher, following her to and from work, watching her house from a distance. Claire convinced herself that if she could just understand Taylor, figure out what made her so special in Oliver's eyes, she could win him back. Claire's cottage became a shrine to her obsession. Walls were covered with photos of Taylor cut from local newspapers and printouts from social media. She created elaborate timelines and diagrams, trying to piece together every detail of Taylor's life and her relationship with Oliver. As weeks turned into months, Claire's fantasies grew darker. She began to imagine scenarios where Taylor was out of the picture, leaving the path clear for her to reclaim Oliver's affections. At first, these were harmless daydreams, Taylor moving away or realizing she didn't love Oliver after all. But gradually, Claire's thoughts turned to murder. She spent hours researching different methods, weighing the pros and cons of each with a detached, almost clinical precision. She created multiple plans, each more elaborate than the last, always careful to cover her tracks and establish alibis. Throughout this time, Claire maintained sporadic contact with Oliver. Their encounters were brief and increasingly tense, with Claire alternating between desperate pleas for him to leave Taylor and icy accusations of betrayal. Oliver, growing uncomfortable with Claire's intensity, began to distance himself, unaware of the dangerous turn her obsession had taken. As winter settled over Millbrook, Claire's plans began to crystallize. She had chosen her method, a staged hit-and-run accident that would leave no trace of her involvement. In her deluded mind, she had convinced herself that eliminating Taylor was not just for her own benefit, but for Oliver's as well. She truly believed that he was trapped in an unhappy marriage and that she would be liberating him. The night before she planned to carry out her deadly scheme, Claire stood in front of her mirror, barely recognizing the wild-eyed woman staring back at her. For a brief moment, a flicker of doubt crossed her mind, but then she remembered the sound of wedding bells, the sight of Oliver kissing his bride, and her resolve hardened once more. On a foggy Wednesday morning in February, Taylor Tanner Holbrook left her house for her daily jog, just as she had done countless times before. The streets were quiet. Most of Millbrook's residents still tucked away in their warm beds. Taylor, with her bright yellow running jacket and bouncing ponytail, was a spot of color in the gray landscape. Unbeknownst to Taylor, Claire Reeves was waiting, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. She sat in a stolen car at the end of a secluded stretch of road, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles had turned white. As Taylor's form appeared through the mist, Claire took a deep breath and turned the key in the ignition. The next few moments passed in a blur of screeching tires, a muffled scream, and the sickening thud of impact. Claire, operating on autopilot, quickly drove away from the scene, leaving Taylor's crumpled body on the side of the road. It was a jogger who found Taylor an hour later. By then it was too late. Despite the best efforts of paramedics, Taylor was pronounced dead at the scene. The news spread through Millbrook like wildfire, leaving the town reeling in shock and grief. In the immediate aftermath, Claire's plan seemed to work perfectly. The police initially treated the incident as a tragic hit-and-run accident. Claire had meticulously planned her alibi, making sure she was seen at a 24-hour diner in a neighboring town both before and after the time of Taylor's death. Oliver, upon hearing the news of his wife's death, put on a convincing display of grief. He wept openly at the funeral, leaning on friends and family for support. To all outward appearances, he was a devastated widower, struggling to come to terms with his loss. But as the initial shock wore off and the investigation deepened, cracks began to appear in the facade. Detective Lisa Montague, assigned to the case, sensed that there was more to Taylor's death than a simple accident. As she dug deeper, she began to uncover the tangled web of relationships that had led to this tragic event. Meanwhile, Claire watched from the sidelines, a mix of guilt and triumph warring within her. She had achieved her goal. Taylor was gone. Now surely Oliver would be hers. But as the days passed and Oliver remained distant, doubt began to creep into her mind. Had she made a terrible mistake? In the weeks following Taylor's death, Millbrook was shrouded in a pall of grief and suspicion. The once friendly neighbors now eyed each other warily, wondering if a killer walked among them. Detective Montague's investigation sent ripples through the community as she interviewed friends, family, and acquaintances of Taylor. Oliver Holbrook maintained his role as the grieving widower, making tearful appearances on local news channels and offering a substantial reward for information leading to the arrest of Taylor's killer. He threw himself into charity work in Taylor's name, establishing a foundation to support local education initiatives. Claire, meanwhile, struggled to maintain her composure. The guilt of her actions weighed heavily on her, manifesting in bouts of insomnia and panic attacks. She obsessively followed the news of the investigation, terrified that each day would bring a knock on her door from the police. As Detective Montague delved deeper into Taylor's life, she began to uncover inconsistencies in Oliver's story. Several witnesses reported seeing him arguing with Taylor in the weeks leading up to her death. Financial records showed large, unexplained withdrawals from their joint account. The detective's attention also turned to Claire. Her erratic behavior in the months prior to Taylor's death had not gone unnoticed, and her sudden calming in the aftermath raised suspicions. When questioned, Claire's alibi seemed airtight, but Montague sensed she was hiding something. As winter gave way to spring, Claire's initial elation at having eliminated her rival began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of unease. Despite her expectations, Oliver had not rushed into her arms in the wake of Taylor's death. In fact, he had become increasingly distant, avoiding her calls and making excuses to cancel their planned meetings. Frustrated and confused, Claire decided to confront Oliver at his office after hours. As she approached the building, she noticed a light on in his window. Peering inside, she saw Oliver in an intimate embrace with a woman she didn't recognize. The sight sent Claire reeling, her world crumbling around her. In that moment, the full weight of what she had done came crashing down on Claire. She had murdered an innocent woman, destroyed countless lives, all for a man who had never truly cared for her. The realization was devastating. Overwhelmed by guilt and anger, Claire stormed into Oliver's office, catching him and the unknown woman by surprise. What followed was a heated confrontation, with Claire unleashing years of pent-up pain and rage. She accused Oliver of using her, of manipulating her feelings to get rid of Taylor. Oliver, his carefully constructed facade finally cracking, didn't deny her accusations. Instead, he coldly informed Claire that she had served her purpose and was no longer needed. He threatened to expose her role in Taylor's death if she didn't disappear from his life for good. Shattered and desperate, Claire fled the office, her mind racing. She now realized the true extent of Oliver's manipulation and her own terrible mistake. As she drove home in a daze, Claire was unaware that her confrontation with Oliver had been witnessed by someone else, someone who would soon set in motion the final act of this tragic play. The woman Claire had seen with Oliver was Olivia Chen, a brilliant young lawyer who had recently joined Oliver's firm. Olivia had been drawn into an affair with Oliver, seduced by his charm and the promise of career advancement. However, unlike Claire, Olivia was not blind to Oliver's true nature. On the night of Claire's confrontation with Oliver, Olivia had hidden herself in an adjoining room, overhearing every word of their heated exchange. The revelation of Oliver's involvement in his wife's death left her cold with horror and disgust. In the days that followed, Olivia found herself grappling with a moral dilemma. She knew she should go to the police with what she had learned, but fear of professional repercussions and her own complicity in the affair held her back. As she observed Oliver continuing to play the role of grieving widower, her revulsion grew. Determined to uncover the full truth, Olivia began her own covert investigation. She meticulously combed through Oliver's files and emails, slowly piecing together the extent of his deceit. What she discovered went far beyond Taylor's murder, revealing a pattern of fraud and manipulation that spanned years. With each new revelation, Olivia's resolve strengthened. She knew what she had to do. Armed with the evidence she had gathered, Olivia confronted Oliver in his office late one evening. She laid out everything she had discovered, from his manipulation of Claire to his fraudulent business practices. Oliver, realizing the precariousness of his situation, attempted to charm and threaten Olivia into silence. But Olivia was prepared. She had secretly recorded their entire conversation, capturing Oliver's implicit admission of guilt. As she turned to leave, intending to take her evidence to the police, Oliver snapped. In a moment of panic and rage, he attacked Olivia, attempting to wrestle the recording device from her hands. What Oliver didn't know was that Olivia, haunted by the fate of Taylor Tanner Holbrook, had come prepared. In the struggle, she managed to reach into her purse and pull out a small pistol. A shot rang out, echoing through the empty office building. Oliver Holbrook, the man who had manipulated so many, who had indirectly caused the death of his wife and the ruin of Claire Reeves, crumpled to the floor. Olivia stood over him, the smoking gun still in her hand, a mix of shock and grim satisfaction on her face. As sirens wailed in the distance, Olivia calmly sat down to wait for the police. She knew that her actions would have consequences, but she also knew that the truth would finally come to light. Oliver Holbrook's reign of deception was over. The shot that killed Oliver Holbrook reverberated through Millbrook, setting off a chain reaction that would finally bring the full story of Taylor's death to light. As Olivia Chen was taken into custody, the true extent of Oliver's manipulations began to unravel. In the wake of Oliver Holbrook's death, the investigation into Taylor's murder took on new urgency. Detective Montague, armed with the evidence Olivia had gathered, began to piece together the full picture of events that had transpired over the past year. Claire Reeves, racked with guilt and fear, finally broke down under questioning. She confessed to her role in Taylor's death, providing a detailed account of her actions and motivations. Her testimony painted a damning picture of Oliver's manipulation and the extent to which he had orchestrated the events leading to his wife's murder. Claire, having confessed to Taylor's murder, was sentenced to life in prison. Olivia's case was more complex. She was convicted of manslaughter, but received a reduced sentence due to the circumstances surrounding Oliver's death. The tragic tale of Oliver Holbrook, Taylor Tanner, Claire Reeves, and Olivia Chen would be remembered for years to come, a somber reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath even the most picturesque surfaces. Donald and Violet Dawson were the golden couple of Riverview. They moved into their elegant two-story house on Maple Street 5 years ago, quickly becoming popular in the tight-knit community. Donald's wit and charm made him a favorite at neighborhood gatherings, while Violet's warm smile and artistic talent endeared her to everyone she met. Together they hosted barbecues, attended charity events, and were often seen jogging together in the mornings, embodying the image of marital bliss. Donald's career as a financial analyst was thriving. He had a keen eye for investments and was climbing the corporate ladder with impressive speed. His colleagues admired his work ethic and sharp mind, often turning to him for advice on financial matters. Violet, on the other hand, ran a successful freelance graphic design business from home. Her designs were in high demand, and she had a loyal client base that appreciated her creativity and attention to detail. Their social circle included other young professionals and couples who often praised their relationship. They seemed to complement each other perfectly. Donald was the outgoing, ambitious partner, while Violet provided a nurturing and supportive presence. They had no children, but they doted on their golden retriever, Max, treating him like their own child. To anyone looking in from the outside, Donald and Violet had it all. But as the months turned into years, small cracks began to appear in their perfect facade. The first signs of trouble were the minor arguments over mundane household matters. Violet would complain about Donald leaving his clothes on the floor or not doing his share of the chores. Donald, in turn, would criticize Violet for her spending habits or the way she managed her time. These disagreements were brushed off as normal marital spats, but they hinted at deeper issues lurking beneath the surface. Their friends noticed the change but didn't think much of it. After all, every couple had their moments of discord. However, those who spent more time with the Dawsons sensed a growing tension. Violet's laughter seemed more forced, and Donald's affectionate gestures appeared increasingly performative. Yet in public, they maintained their image of the perfect couple, never letting their private conflicts spill into their social life. Despite these early signs, Donald and Violet continued to present a united front. They celebrated anniversaries with lavish dinners and weekend getaways, posted loving messages on social media, and attended couples therapy sessions to work on their issues. But behind closed doors, the fights grew more frequent and intense, setting the stage for the dark and twisted events that would ultimately lead to tragedy. As the months went by, the arguments between Donald and Violet became more frequent and intense. The issues that once seemed trivial now escalated into full-blown fights. Donald's controlling behavior began to surface, and Violet's frustration grew with each passing day. The idyllic image of their marriage was slowly disintegrating, revealing a toxic dynamic that neither of them could escape. Donald's control over Violet extended beyond the household chores. He began dictating how she should dress, whom she could meet, and even how she should spend her free time. Violet, once an independent and confident woman, found herself constantly walking on eggshells trying to avoid Donald's wrath. She started to withdraw from her friends, making excuses for not attending social events or meeting for coffee. Her friends noticed the change, but were unsure how to approach the subject. One evening, during a dinner party at their home, the tension between Donald and Violet was palpable. Violet accidentally spilled wine on the tablecloth, and Donald's reaction was swift and harsh. He berated her in front of their guests, his face contorted with anger. The room fell silent, the awkwardness thick in the air. Violet apologized meekly, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Their friends exchanged uneasy glances, but tried to carry on with the evening, not wanting to exacerbate the situation. After the guests left, Donald continued his tirade. Violet tried to defend herself, but her words only seemed to fuel his anger. It was during these moments that Violet glimpsed the darker side of Donald, a side that was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. The man she had once admired and loved was now a source of fear and anxiety. Violet confided in her sister Rachel about the growing issues in her marriage. Rachel was shocked to hear about Donald's behavior, as he had always been charming and respectful around her. She urged Violet to consider leaving him, but Violet was hesitant. She still loved Donald and hoped that their issues could be resolved through therapy and open communication. Donald, on the other hand, dismissed the idea of therapy. He believed that Violet was overreacting and that their problems were normal marital issues. He continued to exert control over every aspect of Violet's life, from her work to her friendships. Violet felt increasingly isolated and trapped, her once vibrant personality dimming under the weight of Donald's dominance. The unraveling of Donald and Violet's marriage was rooted in their pasts, hidden traumas and manipulative tendencies that had remained buried until now. Donald's need for control stemmed from his childhood, where he grew up in a household dominated by his tyrannical father. Witnessing his mother's submissiveness and his father's oppressive behavior, Donald internalized the notion that control was synonymous with love and respect. Violet's past was marked by a different kind of trauma. She had been in an abusive relationship during her college years, which left her with deep emotional scars. She had worked hard to rebuild her life, seeking therapy and finding solace in her career. Meeting Donald had seemed like a fresh start, a chance to leave her painful past behind. But as the years went by, the echoes of her past trauma resurfaced, exacerbated by Donald's controlling behavior. Their marriage, which had once seemed like a partnership of equals, transformed into a battleground of wills. Donald's manipulative tendencies became more pronounced, and Violet's hidden traumas were exploited. Donald would use Violet's past against her, belittling her experiences and making her feel unworthy of love and respect. He manipulated her emotions, alternating between affectionate gestures and harsh criticisms, leaving Violet constantly second-guessing herself. Violet's attempts to seek help from friends or family were often thwarted by Donald's interference. He would charm her friends, making them believe that Violet was exaggerating or being overly sensitive. He isolated her from those who could offer support, ensuring that she remained dependent on him. Violet's cries for help were met with skepticism, as Donald's outward charm and charisma masked his true nature. The twisted game of manipulation and control escalated over time. Donald would gaslight Violet, making her doubt her own perceptions and memories. He would hide her belongings, then accuse her of being forgetful. He would criticize her appearance and decisions, undermining her confidence. Violet, caught in this web of psychological abuse, felt her sense of reality slipping away. Despite the escalating abuse, Violet clung to the hope that things could change. She believed that if she just tried harder, if she just loved Donald enough, things would go back to the way they were. She blamed herself for the growing tension, convinced that she was the problem. Donald reinforced this belief, using it to tighten his grip on her. The turning point in Donald and Violet's tumultuous relationship came one night during an argument that escalated beyond verbal altercations. It started as a typical disagreement over household chores, but the tension quickly mounted. Donald's face twisted with anger as he accused Violet of being lazy and ungrateful. Violet, her patience worn thin, snapped back, telling Donald that she was tired of his constant criticism and control. The argument spiraled out of control, with both of them shouting and hurling accusations. Donald's anger boiled over, and for the first time he struck Violet. The force of the blow sent her reeling, her cheek stinging from the impact. The room fell silent, the reality of what had just happened sinking in. Donald, momentarily stunned by his own actions, quickly regained his composure and began to apologize profusely. He promised it would never happen again, blaming the stress from work and the pressures of life. Violet, shocked and hurt, didn't know how to respond. She had never imagined that their arguments would turn physical. Despite her fear, a part of her still clung to the hope that Donald could change. She accepted his apology, convincing herself that it was a one-time incident, an unfortunate outburst that wouldn't be repeated. But the physical abuse didn't stop. Over the following weeks, Donald's outbursts became more frequent and violent. Violet tried to hide the bruises, making excuses for her injuries when friends or colleagues asked. She became adept at covering up the signs of abuse, using makeup to mask the bruises and long sleeves to hide the marks. Her once vibrant spirit was replaced by a shadow of her former self, her eyes reflecting a deep-seated fear and sadness. In a desperate attempt to break free from the cycle of abuse, Violet confided in her closest friend, Kate. She told Kate about the physical violence and Donald's controlling behavior, hoping that sharing her secret would give her the strength to leave. Kate was horrified and immediately offered her support, urging Violet to contact a domestic violence hotline and seek help. Violet took Kate's advice and called the hotline. Speaking to a counselor who provided her with resources and a safety plan, she started to make preparations to leave, gathering important documents and saving money in a hidden account. Violet felt a glimmer of hope, believing that she could escape the nightmare her life had become. However, Donald's control over Violet was stronger than she anticipated. He grew suspicious of her actions, noticing the small changes in her behavior and the secretive nature of her movements. His paranoia intensified, and he began to monitor her closely, checking her phone and following her when she left the house. Violet's attempts to break free were thwarted at every turn as Donald tightened his grip on her life. The breaking point came when Violet tried to leave one night, only to be caught by Donald as she was sneaking out of the house with a suitcase. Enraged, Donald dragged her back inside, accusing her of betrayal and threatening her with dire consequences if she ever tried to leave again. Violet, terrified and defeated, realized that escaping Donald's control was more difficult than she had ever imagined. In the days that followed, Donald's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He installed surveillance cameras in the house, monitored Violet's every move, and cut off her access to the outside world. Violet felt like a prisoner in her own home, her every action scrutinized and controlled. The glimmer of hope that had once sustained her was extinguished, replaced by a sense of despair and resignation. The twisted game of manipulation and control had reached a dangerous new level, with Donald's paranoia and violence threatening to consume them both. Despite the overwhelming fear and isolation, Violet continued to hold on to a sliver of hope. She documented the abuse in a hidden journal, detailing each incident with meticulous care. One night, after a particularly violent argument, Violet decided she couldn't take it anymore. The fight had started over a minor issue, Donald accusing her of not cooking dinner to his liking, but it quickly escalated. Donald's rage was uncontrollable, and he beat Violet until she was barely conscious. As she lay on the floor, battered and bleeding, Violet made a silent vow to escape no matter the cost. Over the next few days, Violet meticulously planned her escape. She reached out to Kate through a coded message, arranging a time and place to meet. Kate, understanding the gravity of the situation, agreed to help without hesitation. On the night of their planned escape, Violet waited until Donald was asleep before making her move. She quietly gathered her pre-packed bag and slipped out of the house. Her heart pounded in her chest as she made her way to the meeting spot, every shadow and sound amplifying her fear. Kate was waiting at the designated spot, her car idling and ready to go. Violet climbed into the passenger seat, her hands shaking as she clutched her bag. Kate didn't waste any time, driving away from the house as quickly as possible. The sense of relief Violet felt was overwhelming, but it was quickly tempered by the realization that her freedom was still fragile. They drove to a nearby town, where Kate had arranged for Violet to stay at a women's shelter. The shelter provided a safe haven, a place where Violet could begin to rebuild her life without fear of Donald's retribution. The staff at the shelter were supportive and understanding, helping Violet navigate the legal process of obtaining a restraining order and pressing charges against Donald. For the first time in years, Violet felt a glimmer of hope. She was surrounded by people who believed her, who validated her experiences, and provided her with the support she desperately needed. The journey to recovery was daunting, but Violet was determined to reclaim her life and break free from the cycle of abuse. However, Donald was not willing to let go so easily. When he discovered Violet's absence, his rage knew no bounds. He used every resource at his disposal to track her down, refusing to accept that she had escaped his control. The twisted game of manipulation and control had reached its final, deadly stage, setting the stage for a confrontation that would have tragic consequences. Violet had been staying at the women's shelter for a few weeks, slowly beginning to heal and regain her sense of self. The staff and other residents provided a supportive community, helping her navigate the complexities of her situation. She had obtained a restraining order against Donald, and the shelter had taken measures to ensure her safety. However, Donald's obsession with Violet only grew stronger in her absence. He scoured social media to track her down. His need to control her had reached a dangerous level, driven by a toxic mix of anger, jealousy, and possessiveness. Donald's paranoia and determination to reclaim Violet culminated in a meticulously planned confrontation. On the night of June 27th, Donald finally discovered Violet's location. He had been stalking the shelter for days, watching and waiting for the right moment. When he saw Violet leave the shelter to run an errand, he followed her, careful to remain undetected. Violet was unaware of his presence, her mind occupied with thoughts of her new life and the steps she needed to take to move forward. As Violet returned to the shelter, she felt a strange unease, a sense that something was not right. She quickened her pace, her heart racing as she approached the shelter's entrance. Before she could reach the door, Donald appeared, blocking her path. The look in his eyes was a chilling combination of rage and determination. Donald's voice was low and menacing as he demanded that Violet come with him. Violet tried to remain calm, her voice shaking as she told him to leave and that she had a restraining order against him. But Donald was beyond reason. He grabbed her arm, his grip tight and painful, and started dragging her towards his car. Violet struggled, screaming for help, but the street was deserted and her cries went unanswered. In a desperate bid to break free, Violet managed to pull out her phone and dial 911. The call connected, but before she could speak, Donald slapped the phone out of her hand, sending it crashing to the ground. Violet's panic intensified as she realized the severity of the situation. Donald's anger was palpable, his grip on her arm unrelenting. In a final desperate attempt to escape, Violet kicked Donald and tried to run. But Donald was faster and stronger. He caught up to her and, in a fit of rage, began to beat her mercilessly. Violet's cries for help echoed through the empty street, but no one came to her aid. Donald's fury was uncontrollable, and he didn't stop until Violet lay motionless on the ground. As the reality of what he had done sank in, Donald's rage gave way to panic. He looked around, realizing that the commotion could attract attention. He quickly dragged Violet's body to his car, his mind racing as he tried to think of a plan. He knew he needed to get rid of the evidence and cover his tracks. Donald drove to a remote area outside of town, a place he knew would be deserted at this hour. He put his hand on her neck. There was no pulse. He carried her into the woods, his heart pounding as he dug a shallow grave. He placed her body in the grave, covering it with dirt and debris. Donald's hands shook as he worked, the reality of his actions hitting him with full force. He knew there was no turning back. After burying Violet, Donald returned to his car, his mind racing with thoughts of how to cover his tracks. He disposed of her belongings, including her phone, and cleaned the car meticulously, trying to eliminate any traces of evidence. Donald knew that the police would come looking for him, but he was confident that he could outsmart them. Back at the shelter, the staff discovered Violet's absence and the signs of a struggle near the entrance. They immediately called the police, reporting her missing and providing details of her situation. The police launched an investigation, quickly identifying Donald as the prime suspect. The investigation was swift and thorough. Donald's history of abuse, the restraining order, and his known obsession with Violet made him the obvious suspect. The police tracked his movements, interviewed witnesses, and gathered evidence. It didn't take long for them to piece together the events of that fateful night. Friends and family were interviewed, providing crucial insights into the dynamics of Donald and Violet's relationship. Kate, Violet's closest friend, recounted the numerous times Violet had confided in her about the abuse. She shared the details of Violet's escape plan and their coded messages, revealing the extent of Violet's fear and desperation. Kate's testimony painted a stark contrast between the public image of the Dawsons and the dark reality behind closed doors. Rachel, Violet's sister, spoke of the early signs of trouble she had noticed in their marriage. She described Donald's controlling behavior and the gradual isolation of Violet from her family. Rachel's account of Violet's past trauma and her struggles to rebuild her life added another layer to the understanding of the abuse she had endured. During the interrogation, Donald initially tried to maintain his innocence, but the weight of the evidence was too great. His story unraveled under the pressure, and he eventually confessed to the murder. He described the events of that night with chilling detail, his voice devoid of remorse or empathy. Donald's confession confirmed the police's findings, solidifying the case against him. The community of Riverview was shocked by the revelations. The couple they had once admired and envied had been hiding a dark and twisted reality. The news of Violet's murder and the details of the abuse she had suffered sent shockwaves through the neighborhood. The unraveling of Donald and Violet's relationship, from the seemingly perfect marriage to the tragic and violent end, served as a stark reminder of the dangers of domestic abuse. After several days of testimony and deliberation, the jury returned with a guilty verdict. Donald was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His fate was sealed, and the community of Riverview could begin to heal. The murder of Violet Dawson was a tragic and heartbreaking event that left an indelible mark on the community of Riverview. The seemingly perfect couple, whose public life had been the envy of many, was revealed to have been hiding a dark and twisted reality. The local high school in Oakville stood as a pillar of the community, shaping the minds of the town's youth for generations. It was here, in the fall of 2022, that a chilling series of events would unfold, forever shattering the town's sense of security and innocence. At the center of this harrowing tale were two individuals: Miranda Jarvis, a vibrant 18-year-old senior, was the epitome of small-town charm. With her long auburn hair, bright green eyes, and a smile that could light up a room, Miranda was beloved by her peers and teachers alike. She excelled in her studies, particularly in English literature, and harbored dreams of becoming a writer. Enter Mark Reynolds, a 32-year-old substitute teacher who arrived in Oakville with a mysterious past and a quiet demeanor that initially endeared him to the faculty and students. As the crisp autumn air settled over Oakville, no one could have predicted the dark storm brewing on the horizon. The story that unfolded over the following months would test the limits of human obsession, challenge the town's faith in its institutions, and leave an indelible mark on all those involved. This is the true account of how a substitute teacher's unhealthy fixation on a student spiraled into a nightmare that would haunt Oakville for years to come. Miranda Jarvis was born and raised in Oakville, the only child of James and Lucy Jarvis. Her father owned the local hardware store, while her mother worked as a nurse at the town's small hospital. From a young age, Miranda displayed a precocious intelligence and a vivid imagination that set her apart from her peers. Throughout her childhood and teenage years, Miranda's passion for literature and writing blossomed. She devoured classic novels, penned short stories, and kept a detailed journal of her thoughts and experiences. Her teachers often praised her insightful essays and creative writing pieces, predicting a bright future for the young wordsmith. Miranda's life wasn't without its challenges. In her sophomore year, her parents went through a rough patch in their marriage, leading to a brief separation. The experience deeply affected Miranda, and she channeled her emotions into her writing. Mark Reynolds' path to Oakville High School was far from conventional. Born in a bustling city on the East Coast, Mark had always been drawn to the world of literature and academia. He excelled in his studies, particularly in English and philosophy. Despite his academic achievements, Mark struggled to find his footing in the professional world. He began his career as a high school English teacher in his hometown, where he quickly gained a reputation for his engaging teaching style and deep knowledge of literature. However, after 3 years, Mark abruptly resigned from his position under mysterious circumstances. Rumors circulated about an inappropriate relationship with a student, but nothing was ever proven, and no charges were filed. Following this setback, Mark drifted from job to job, never staying in one place for too long. He worked as a copywriter, a bookstore clerk, and even tried his hand at writing a novel. But success eluded him. As the years passed, a sense of bitterness and resentment began to take root in Mark's psyche. He felt that the world had denied him the recognition and success he deserved. The crisp morning air of September 15, 2022, held no hint of the pivotal moment about to unfold within the walls of Oakville School. As students filed into Mrs. Henderson's advanced English literature class, a buzz of curiosity filled the room. Their regular teacher was out on maternity leave, and today they would meet their long-term substitute. Mark Reynolds stood at the front of the classroom. He introduced himself with a quiet confidence. As he began to discuss the semester's curriculum, focusing on Gothic literature, many students found themselves drawn in by his evident passion for the subject. It was during this introduction that Mark's eyes first fell on Miranda Jarvis. Seated in the second row, her hair catching the morning sunlight streaming through the windows, Miranda listened with rapt attention. When Mark posed a question about the themes in Edgar Allan Poe's works, Miranda's hand shot up, and she offered an insightful analysis that caught the substitute teacher off guard. Mark, impressed by her eloquence, engaged Miranda in a brief discussion about Poe's use of symbolism. As they talked, he noticed the spark of intelligence in her green eyes, the way she articulated her thoughts with a maturity beyond her years. For a moment, Mark felt a connection he hadn't experienced in years, the thrill of intellectual discourse with a kindred spirit. As the class progressed, Mark found his gaze repeatedly drawn to Miranda. He called on her often, each time feeling a small surge of excitement at her thoughtful responses. When the bell rang, signaling the end of the period, Miranda lingered behind, approaching Mark's desk with a copy of her favorite Poe story, The Fall of the House of Usher. They engaged in a brief but animated discussion about the story's Gothic elements and psychological undertones. As Miranda turned to leave, she smiled warmly at Mark, thanking him for the engaging class. Mark watched her go, a strange mix of emotions stirring within him: admiration, intrigue, and something darker that he couldn't quite name. That night, as Mark sat alone in his rented room, his thoughts kept drifting back to Miranda. He told himself it was merely the excitement of finding a promising student, someone who shared his passion for literature. But deep down, in a part of his psyche he dared not examine too closely, Mark knew that something had shifted. The seed of obsession had been planted, and it would soon grow into a twisted, all-consuming force that would change everything. In the weeks following that first encounter, Mark Reynolds' fixation on Miranda Jarvis grew at an alarming rate. Mark found himself looking forward to his advanced English literature class with an intensity that both thrilled and unsettled him. As September gave way to October, Mark's behavior began to change in subtle but significant ways. He started arriving at school earlier, hoping to catch a glimpse of Miranda in the hallways. He lingered in the teacher's lounge, eavesdropping on conversations about students, his ears perking up at any mention of her name. Mark's nights were increasingly consumed by thoughts of Miranda. He pored over her essays, reading and rereading them long after he had finished grading. He began to imagine conversations with her, picturing scenarios where they could interact outside of class. In his mind, Miranda understood him in a way no one else ever had. One evening, while grading papers, Mark came across a personal essay Miranda had written about her aspirations to become a writer. The raw honesty and vulnerability in her words struck a chord deep within him. That night, he crossed a line he had never dared to before. He searched for Miranda on social media. Mark spent hours scrolling through Miranda's public posts, absorbing every detail of her life outside of school. He learned about her favorite books, her hobbies, the cafes she frequented with her friends. Each new piece of information fed his growing obsession, making him feel closer to her. As his fixation intensified, Mark's teaching began to suffer. He would lose his train of thought mid-lecture, distracted by Miranda's presence. Other students noticed his frequent glances in her direction, the way his voice would soften when addressing her. Whispers and giggles sometimes rippled through the classroom, but Mark was oblivious to everything except Miranda. Outside of school, Mark's life began to revolve around his obsession. He started frequenting the local library where Miranda volunteered, pretending to browse books while watching her from afar. He would drive past her house on his way home, his heart racing at the thought of catching a glimpse of her through a window. Mark knew on some level that his behavior was inappropriate and potentially dangerous. There were moments of clarity when he would be struck by the magnitude of his obsession, and he would resolve to put it behind him. But these moments were fleeting, quickly overwhelmed by the intoxicating pull of his fixation on Miranda. As October drew to a close, Mark's obsession reached a fever pitch. He began to fantasize about a future with Miranda, convincing himself that she must feel the same connection he did. The line between reality and his twisted imagination blurred, setting the stage for the disturbing events that were about to unfold. The first truly alarming incident occurred on a chilly November afternoon. Miranda had stayed after class to discuss a paper with Mark, unaware of the tempest brewing within her teacher. As she gathered her things to leave, Mark impulsively reached out and touched her hand, ostensibly to take the paper she was handing him. The contact lasted only a second, but it sent a jolt through Mark's system. Miranda, startled by the unexpected touch, quickly withdrew her hand. She noticed a strange intensity in Mark's eyes that made her uncomfortable. Mumbling a hasty goodbye, she hurried out of the classroom, leaving Mark standing there, his hand still tingling from the brief contact. That evening, Miranda confided in her best friend Lily about the odd interaction. While Lily brushed it off as nothing serious, Miranda couldn't shake the uneasy feeling it left her with. She resolved to be more cautious around Mr. Reynolds, but didn't want to make a big deal out of what could have been an innocent mistake. Mark, on the other hand, spent the night reliving that moment of contact. In his mind, it became a significant event, a sign that his feelings for Miranda were reciprocated. 2 weeks after the hand-touching incident, Mark's behavior took an even more concerning turn. During lunch period, he overheard Miranda telling a friend about a poetry reading at a local bookstore that evening. Unable to resist the temptation, Mark decided to attend. That night, he sat in the back of the dimly lit bookstore, watching as Miranda and her friends arrived. Throughout the reading, Mark's eyes never left Miranda. He observed every laugh, every thoughtful nod, every whispered comment to her friends. In his mind, he was sharing the experience with her, part of her world. As the event ended and people began to leave, Miranda spotted Mark. Surprise and a flicker of unease crossed her face. She approached him hesitantly, asking if he had enjoyed the reading. Mark, caught off guard, stumbled through a response, his usual eloquence deserting him. Miranda quickly excused herself, visibly uncomfortable. As she left with her friends, Mark overheard her whispering, "He's everywhere lately. It's kind of creepy." The words hit Mark like a physical blow, but instead of serving as a wake-up call, they only intensified his obsession. The situation reached a critical point in early December. Miranda had been avoiding staying after class and tried to minimize her interactions with Mark. Frustrated and increasingly desperate, Mark made a decision that would irreversibly cross the line. Using the emergency contact information from the school records, Mark obtained Miranda's home address. One evening, he drove to her house, parking down the street. He sat there for hours, watching the Jarvis residence, imagining Miranda inside going about her evening routine. As luck would have it, Miranda stepped out to take out the trash. When she spotted Mark's car, recognition dawned on her face, quickly followed by fear. She hurried back inside, locking the door behind her. Panicked, Mark drove away, his mind racing. He knew he had gone too far, but he couldn't stop himself. The next day at school, Miranda was absent. When she returned the following day, she looked pale and avoided eye contact with Mark. Unbeknownst to Mark, Miranda had reported the incident to her parents and the school principal. An investigation was quietly launched, but before any action could be taken, the situation would take a dramatic and tragic turn. The morning of December 15, 2022, dawned cold and gray in Oakville. As families across town began their daily routines, Lucy Jarvis knocked on her daughter's bedroom door, calling out that breakfast was ready. When she received no response, Lucy opened the door expecting to find Miranda still asleep. Instead, she was met with an empty, undisturbed bed. Panic quickly set in as Lucy and James Jarvis searched their home, calling Miranda's name. Her car was still in the driveway, her phone left on her nightstand. There was no sign of forced entry, no note left behind. It was as if Miranda had simply vanished into thin air. The Jarvis immediately called the police, and within hours the quiet town of Oakville was transformed into a hive of activity. Police cars patrolled the streets, and search parties were organized to comb through nearby woods and parks. As the search for Miranda Jarvis entered its second week, the Oakville Police Department's investigation shifted into high gear. Detective Lucy Reeves, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for solving complex cases, took the lead. Her first order of business was to re-interview everyone in Miranda's life, starting with her closest friends and family. Lily Thompson recounted to Detective Reeves the growing unease Miranda had expressed about Mr. Reynolds' behavior in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. She mentioned the incident at the poetry reading and Miranda's discomfort with Mr. Reynolds' increasing presence in her life. On December 23rd, Detective Reeves brought Mark Reynolds in for formal questioning. In the stark interrogation room of the police station, Mark sat across from Reeves, his usual composure noticeably shaken. Detective Reeves began the interview casually, asking about Mark's background and his time at Oakville School. As the questions turned to his relationship with Miranda, Mark's responses became increasingly evasive. He denied any inappropriate behavior, insisting that his interest in Miranda was purely academic. But when confronted with evidence of his presence outside Miranda's house the night before her disappearance, Mark's facade began to crack. He stammered through an explanation about wanting to drop off some books for Miranda to read over the winter break. But his story was full of inconsistencies. As the interrogation wore on, Detective Reeves noticed Mark's right hand constantly fidgeting with something in his pocket. When asked to empty his pockets, Mark hesitated before reluctantly pulling out a delicate silver charm bracelet. With a sinking feeling, Reeves recognized it as the bracelet Miranda was wearing in the most recent photos her parents had provided. Mark's possession of Miranda's personal item was damning. He was immediately arrested on suspicion of involvement in Miranda's disappearance. As he was led away in handcuffs, Mark maintained his innocence, his eyes wild with a mix of fear and something darker that sent chills down Detective Reeves' spine. The news of Mark Reynolds' arrest sent shockwaves through Oakville. The community struggled to reconcile the image of the quiet, intellectual substitute teacher with the disturbing allegations against him. Parents demanded answers from the school board about how such a person had been allowed to teach their children. As the investigation continued, police executed a search warrant on Mark's rented room. Hidden in a locked drawer, detectives discovered a journal filled with rambling entries about Miranda. The evidence painted a chilling picture of Mark's deteriorating mental state and his unhealthy fixation on Miranda. But one crucial question remained unanswered. Where was Miranda Jarvis? Despite Mark's arrest and the damning evidence against him, there was still no trace of the missing girl. One entry, dated December 14th, caught Detective Reeves's attention. In it, Mark wrote about a special place where he and Miranda could be together forever, away from the judgmental eyes of the world. The entry was vague, but it mentioned an abandoned property on the outskirts of town. Acting on this lead, police conducted a thorough search of abandoned buildings in the area. On December 27th, their efforts paid off when they discovered an old dilapidated cabin deep in the woods outside Oakville. As officers approached the cabin, they noticed signs of recent activity, fresh tire tracks in the mud and a faint smell of smoke from the chimney. With hearts racing, the police team breached the cabin. Inside, they found evidence of someone living there recently. Food wrappers, a makeshift bed, and most disturbingly, several of Miranda's personal items scattered around the room. But there was no sign of Miranda herself. Meanwhile, Mark Reynolds remained in custody, stubbornly maintaining his innocence despite the mounting evidence against him. During interrogations, he alternated between proclaiming his love for Miranda and insisting that he was being framed. His erratic behavior led the district attorney to order a psychological evaluation. Volunteers joined the police in searching the woods, hoping to find any trace of Miranda. In a surprising turn of events, on December 30th, Lily Thompson came forward with new information. Trembling and visibly distressed, she revealed to Detective Reeves that she had been withholding crucial details out of fear and misplaced loyalty. Lily recounted a conversation she had with Miranda just days before her disappearance. Miranda had confided in her about a secret online relationship she had been having with someone she met in a writing forum. This revelation shifted the focus of the investigation. While Mark Reynolds remained a person of interest, the police now had to consider the possibility that Miranda's disappearance was connected to this mysterious online figure. The IP address used by the user in the writing forum was traced back to a computer in the Oakville School Library. Cross-referencing the times of the online interactions with the school's records, Reeves found that they coincided perfectly with Mark Reynolds' free periods. This revelation cast the entire case in a new light. Mark hadn't just been obsessing over Miranda from afar. He had been actively manipulating her, creating a false persona to gain her trust and lure her into a meeting. Armed with this new information, Reeves confronted Mark in another intense interrogation. Initially, he tried to maintain his innocence, but as Reeves laid out the evidence piece by piece, Mark's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. In a chilling moment, Mark's demeanor suddenly shifted. Gone was the nervous, protesting teacher, replaced by a cold, calculating individual. With an unsettling calmness, he began to reveal the full extent of his deception. Mark admitted to creating the online persona months earlier. Long before he came to Oakville, he had been grooming Miranda online, gaining her trust and fueling her dreams of becoming a writer. It was just after dawn when a search dog picked up a scent. Following the dog's lead, rescuers pushed deeper into the forest, hope and dread warring in their hearts. As they crested a small hill, they spotted a flash of color against the dull winter landscape: Miranda's bright blue jacket. Miranda Jarvis was found huddled in the hollow of an old oak tree, cold, dehydrated, and terrified, but alive. As Miranda recovered in the hospital, surrounded by her overjoyed parents and a protective police presence, the full story of her ordeal came to light. She recounted how she had agreed to meet mysterious online user at the cabin, believing it to be a surprise arranged by a supportive mentor. The shock and terror she felt upon discovering Mark's true identity drove her to flee into the woods, where she had been wandering and hiding for over 2 weeks, surviving on stream water and whatever edible plants she could recognize. The aftermath of Miranda's rescue and Mark's arrest was far-reaching. The school faced intense scrutiny over its hiring practices and student protection policies. Several administrators resigned in the wake of the scandal, and the school board implemented stringent new background check procedures for all staff. Mark was convicted on multiple charges, including kidnapping, stalking, and child endangerment. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison, without the possibility of parole. For Miranda and her family, the road to recovery was long and challenging. Miranda underwent extensive therapy to deal with the trauma of her experience. She found solace in writing, using her journal to process her emotions, and eventually turning her story into a powerful memoir that would go on to help other survivors of stalking and abuse. As for Oakville, the town would never be quite the same. The innocence of small-town life had been shattered, replaced by a wary vigilance. Yet in the face of this tragedy, the community had come together, demonstrating the power of collective action and the resilience of the human spirit. The case of Miranda Jarvis and Mark Reynolds serves as a chilling reminder of the dark undercurrents that can exist beneath the surface of even the most seemingly idyllic communities. It highlights the vulnerability of young people in an increasingly connected world and the insidious ways in which predators can manipulate and exploit their victims. Emily Parker was born and raised in the quiet town of Maplewood, Ohio. Her parents, Richard and Ann Parker, were well-respected members of the community. Richard owned a local hardware store, while Ann was a nurse at the nearby hospital. Emily, the middle child with an older brother, Jack, and a younger sister, Sarah, was the apple of her parents' eyes. From an early age, Emily exhibited a zest for life. She was an exceptional student, excelling in her studies and participating in various extracurricular activities. Her passion for teaching emerged during her high school years, inspired by a history teacher who brought the past to life in vivid detail. Emily pursued her dream by attending Ohio State University, where she earned her degree in education. After college, Emily returned to Maplewood and secured a teaching position at the local elementary school. Her dedication to her students was unparalleled. She often stayed late to help with after-school programs and tutored struggling students on weekends. Her colleagues admired her enthusiasm, and parents often requested her for their children's classes. Outside of her professional life, Emily had a wide range of interests. She loved hiking, photography, and reading historical novels. Her weekends were often spent exploring nature trails or curled up with a good book. Friends described her as warm, compassionate, and always ready to lend a helping hand. Emily met David Reynolds at a friend's wedding. He was charming, with a quick wit and an easy smile. David, a financial consultant from New York City, was visiting for the wedding. The attraction was immediate, and their whirlwind romance took everyone by surprise. David lavished Emily with attention, expensive gifts, and exotic trips. Their courtship was brief but intense, and within a year David proposed. Emily, swept off her feet by his charisma and the promise of a glamorous life, said yes. Her family and friends had mixed feelings about the rapid engagement. While they wanted to support Emily's happiness, they couldn't shake a sense of unease about David. He was always impeccably dressed, driving luxury cars and staying in upscale hotels, but his extravagant lifestyle seemed at odds with his modest background. Emily, however, was enamored and reassured everyone that David was her soulmate. Their wedding was a grand affair, held in a picturesque vineyard and attended by over 200 guests. Emily's friends from Maplewood and David's associates from New York mingled under fairy lights and sipped champagne, celebrating the union. As the newlyweds departed for their honeymoon in St. Lucia, no one could have predicted the dark turn their love story would take. David Reynolds was born and raised in Queens, New York. His parents, Thomas and Margaret Reynolds, struggled to make ends meet. Thomas worked as a mechanic, while Margaret held various part-time jobs to support their 3 children. David, the eldest, grew up with a strong drive to escape the financial hardships of his upbringing. From a young age, David exhibited a knack for numbers and a shrewd understanding of money. He excelled in school, earning a scholarship to New York University where he studied finance. David's ambition was evident. He spent his college years networking and securing internships at prestigious firms. His relentless work ethic paid off, and upon graduation, he landed a coveted position at a top financial consultancy. David quickly rose through the ranks, his talent for investment strategies and financial planning earning him a reputation as a rising star. His success afforded him a lifestyle he had always dreamed of: designer suits, high-end cars, and a luxury apartment in Manhattan. However, his professional success masked deeper issues. Colleagues often described David as charming but ruthless, willing to bend the rules to achieve his goals. David's personal life was equally complex. His charm attracted many women, but his relationships were often short-lived. He had a series of high-profile romances, each ending abruptly amid rumors of infidelity and deceit. Despite this, he maintained a polished public image, carefully curating his social media to portray a life of sophistication and success. When David met Emily Parker, she represented something different. Her genuine warmth and small-town innocence were a stark contrast to the superficial relationships he was accustomed to. To his friends, it seemed like David was truly in love for the first time. But as their relationship progressed, cracks began to appear. David's financial empire was not as solid as it seemed. Behind the scenes, he was entangled in risky investments and mounting debts. David's financial troubles were compounded by his extravagant spending habits. He kept these issues hidden from Emily, presenting only the image of a successful and devoted partner. His decision to propose was as much about securing a future with Emily as it was about seeking stability amid his growing financial chaos. Their wedding, though a joyous occasion, also marked the point where David's deceptions began to catch up with him. St. Lucia, with its lush landscapes and serene beaches, was the perfect backdrop for David and Emily's honeymoon. They stayed at an exclusive resort, their bungalow perched on the edge of a secluded cove. The first few days were filled with romantic dinners, sunset walks, and excursions to explore the island's natural beauty. Emily documented their adventures on social media, her posts filled with joy and excitement. On the night of Emily's disappearance, the couple dined at the resort's beachfront restaurant. The atmosphere was idyllic. Soft music played in the background, and tiki torches flickered in the gentle breeze. Fellow diners noticed the couple laughing and holding hands, seemingly in love. The staff, accustomed to honeymooners, paid them little special attention. After dinner, David suggested a moonlit walk along the beach. Emily, always one for romance, readily agreed. They strolled along the water's edge, the sound of the waves mingling with their conversation. David later recounted that Emily had expressed a desire to take a swim. She slipped off her sandals and waded into the water, the moonlight casting a silver glow on her figure. According to David, he returned to their bungalow to fetch a jacket for Emily. When he came back, she was gone. Panic set in as he searched the beach, calling her name. He alerted the resort staff, who joined the search, but Emily was nowhere to be found. David's distress seemed genuine as he spoke with the resort's manager, his voice cracking and hands trembling. The following morning, the local police were notified. They began an immediate investigation, questioning resort staff and guests. Divers searched the waters near the beach, and sniffer dogs were brought in to track any scent that might lead to Emily. Despite their efforts, no clues emerged. The beach was combed for any personal items, but nothing was found. As the hours turned into days, David's behavior began to attract scrutiny. He appeared genuinely distraught, but there were moments when his composure seemed forced. The police noted his meticulous recounting of events, almost as if rehearsed. Resort staff mentioned his insistence on calling his lawyer soon after Emily's disappearance, which struck them as odd. Witnesses provided conflicting accounts. Some recalled seeing the couple arguing earlier in the day, while others described them as affectionate. A few guests reported hearing raised voices from their bungalow the night before Emily vanished. The police were left with a puzzling mix of evidence and testimonies that painted an inconsistent picture of the couple's final hours together. As the investigation stalled, David's narrative was the only story available. His plea for information was broadcast on news networks, his tearful face becoming the public image of a grieving husband. Yet behind the scenes, Detective Hayes was piecing together a different story, one that hinted at a more sinister truth. Detective Hayes arrived at the resort, greeted by the tropical heat and the sight of tourists enjoying their vacations, seemingly unaware of the drama unfolding. His first step was to interview David Reynolds. Sitting across from him in the resort's lounge, Hayes observed David's demeanor carefully. The man seemed genuinely distraught, but there was an underlying tension that the seasoned detective couldn't ignore. David recounted the events of the night Emily disappeared, his voice steady but his eyes betraying a flicker of anxiety. Hayes listened intently, asking pointed questions about their activities, their relationship, and any possible reasons Emily might have had to leave suddenly. David's answers were consistent, but Hayes felt they were too polished, as if rehearsed. The detective then spoke with the resort staff and other guests. The accounts varied, some aligning with David's story while others contradicted it. A waitress at the restaurant mentioned that David seemed agitated during dinner, frequently checking his phone. A couple staying in a neighboring bungalow reported hearing an argument late at night, although they couldn't make out the words. Hayes's team searched the couple's bungalow and the surrounding area. They found Emily's belongings neatly packed, her passport and wallet untouched. Her phone was missing, presumably with her. A thorough examination of the beach yielded no new clues. The tide and weather had likely washed away any trace evidence. As the days passed, the investigation broadened. Hayes looked into David's background, finding a man who was both successful and secretive. His financial records revealed a troubling pattern. Despite his high-paying job, David was deep in debt. Large withdrawals from his accounts suggested a gambling problem, and several investments had failed spectacularly. Hayes interviewed David's colleagues and friends in New York, uncovering a different side of him. They described David as charming but unreliable, with a penchant for risky ventures and a history of romantic entanglements. One colleague, who requested anonymity, mentioned that David had recently been involved in a scandal at work, hinting at financial misconduct. The detectives' team also analyzed phone records and bank statements, uncovering a web of transactions that pointed to financial distress. Several large transfers had been made to offshore accounts, and David had taken out substantial loans shortly before the wedding. These findings suggested that David was far from the affluent figure he portrayed. As suspicion around David grew, the investigation took a dramatic turn with the discovery of a letter in Emily's handwriting, found hidden in her suitcase. It was addressed to her parents and hinted at her growing unease about David. She wrote about discovering discrepancies in his stories and financial dealings, expressing fear that she had made a terrible mistake in marrying him. The evidence was mounting, and Detective Hayes felt the pieces of the puzzle starting to come together. But without Emily, the case remained frustratingly incomplete. The detective was determined to uncover the truth, knowing that the facade of the perfect honeymoon was hiding something far more sinister. The financial investigation into David Reynolds' affairs revealed a cascade of deceit. Detective Hayes and his team uncovered a complex network of bank accounts, hidden assets, and dubious transactions. David's financial empire, once thought to be thriving, was crumbling under the weight of risky investments and substantial debts. As Hayes delved deeper, he discovered that David had been involved in several questionable business ventures. One such venture was a failed real estate development in Florida, which had resulted in significant losses for investors. Another was a tech startup that went bankrupt, leaving David with substantial debts. These ventures, combined with his gambling habits, had drained his resources and left him in a precarious financial position. David's secret debts and business failures provided a possible motive for foul play. With Emily's disappearance, questions arose about potential life insurance policies or other financial benefits he might gain. Hayes's team found that David had recently taken out a substantial life insurance policy on Emily, raising further suspicions. Testimonies from friends and colleagues about David's character began to form a consistent narrative. They described him as someone who would do anything to maintain his image of success, even if it meant deceiving those closest to him. Emily, it seemed, had been drawn into a web of lies and financial manipulation. The mounting evidence suggested that David's involvement in Emily's disappearance was more than just circumstantial. His financial desperation, coupled with the inconsistencies in his story, pointed to a more sinister motive. As the investigation continued, Detective Hayes knew that the key to solving the case lay in uncovering the full extent of David's deceit and the secrets he had worked so hard to conceal. As the investigation deepened, another layer of David Reynolds' double life began to unfold. His extramarital affairs. Detectives uncovered a series of clandestine relationships that painted a picture of a man far different from the devoted husband he appeared to be. David's phone records and emails revealed communications with several women, some of whom he had met through his business dealings, while others were casual encounters. These relationships ranged from fleeting flings to more serious entanglements. Detective Hayes and his team meticulously tracked down and interviewed these women, each conversation revealing more about David's deceptive nature. One of the women, Laura Mitchell, a marketing executive from New York, provided crucial insight. She described her relationship with David as passionate but tumultuous. They had met at a conference a year before his wedding, and their affair continued well into his engagement with Emily. Laura was unaware of David's upcoming marriage until she saw the wedding announcement on social media. Feeling betrayed, she ended their relationship but kept records of their communications, which she willingly shared with the investigators. Another woman, Jessica Evans, a real estate agent from Miami, had a similar story. She and David had met during one of his business trips, and their affair was marked by lavish gifts and extravagant promises. Jessica, too, was in the dark about David's marital status. She described him as attentive and affectionate, but noted his tendency to vanish for days without explanation. The most damning testimony came from Rachel Turner, a colleague from his firm who had been involved with David for nearly 2 years. Rachel's account revealed a pattern of manipulation and deceit. She recounted how David had confided in her about his financial troubles, painting himself as a victim of unfortunate circumstances. Rachel, deeply infatuated with him, had even loaned him money on several occasions, believing his promises to repay her once his investments paid off. These revelations had a profound impact on the case. They not only established a pattern of deceit, but also suggested potential motives for Emily's disappearance. David's affairs indicated a man capable of maintaining multiple lives, each carefully compartmentalized to prevent discovery. His ability to juggle these relationships while hiding his financial troubles from Emily spoke to his skill at deception. Interviews with his past lovers painted a picture of a man driven by a need for validation and material success. They described how David would often speak of his ambitions and dreams, using his charm to elicit sympathy and support. His relationships, both romantic and financial, were tools he used to navigate his increasingly precarious life. The impact of these revelations on the case was significant. They provided a motive for foul play, suggesting that David might have seen Emily as both an obstacle and a solution to his problems. With his financial empire collapsing and his web of lies unraveling, the pressure on David had reached a breaking point. Emily's disappearance and the subsequent focus on David threatened to expose his entire charade. As Detective Hayes pieced together the evidence, it became clear that the investigation was far from straightforward. Each new discovery added complexity to the case, revealing the depths of David's deceit and the lengths he was willing to go to maintain his facade. The true challenge lay in proving his involvement beyond doubt, a task that required uncovering every hidden aspect of his life. Just when Detective Hayes believed he had a clear picture of David Reynolds' involvement in Emily's disappearance, a shocking twist emerged. A mysterious figure, previously unknown to the investigation, came forward with information that turned the case on its head. The figure was a man named Alex Carter, a private investigator from New York. Alex contacted Detective Hayes, claiming to have crucial information about David Reynolds and his activities. Intrigued and cautious, Hayes arranged a meeting. In a dimly lit cafe, Alex revealed his connection to the case. Alex explained that he had been hired by an anonymous client to investigate David Reynolds months before Emily's disappearance. His client had suspected David of financial misconduct and infidelity, and Alex's investigation had uncovered significant evidence of both. He had been tracking David's movements and communications, documenting his secret affairs and shady business dealings. But Alex's most startling revelation was about Emily. According to his findings, Emily had discovered David's infidelity and financial troubles shortly before their wedding. She had confided in a close friend, expressing her doubts and fears about marrying David. This friend, concerned for Emily's safety, had anonymously hired Alex to gather evidence, hoping to give Emily a way out of her situation. Alex provided Detective Hayes with a dossier of his findings, including photographs, financial records, and transcripts of conversations. One particularly damning piece of evidence was a recording of a conversation between David and an unknown associate discussing plans that hinted at foul play. The recording suggested that David had been plotting something sinister, although the details were vague. This new information complicated the case significantly. It introduced the possibility that Emily might have been aware of David's plans and had taken steps to protect herself. Detective Hayes considered the idea that Emily could have staged her disappearance to escape David's clutches, although the lack of concrete evidence made this theory difficult to prove. Hayes decided to re-interview everyone involved, armed with the new information. He spoke again with Emily's family and friends, uncovering more details about her state of mind before the wedding. Emily's best friend, Lisa, revealed that Emily had been increasingly anxious in the weeks leading up to the honeymoon. She had confided in Lisa about her fears and mentioned the anonymous tipster who had warned her about David. David's reaction to the reopened investigation was one of surprise and agitation. He denied any involvement in Emily's disappearance and dismissed the evidence provided by Alex Carter as fabrications. However, his growing frustration and inconsistent statements only added to the suspicion surrounding him. The twist in the case forced Detective Hayes to consider all possibilities. He intensified the search for Emily, exploring the idea that she might have gone into hiding. The investigation expanded to include airports, border crossings, and potential safe houses. The media coverage, once focused solely on David, began to speculate about Emily's fate and her possible role in the unfolding drama. As the investigation continued, Detective Hayes faced mounting pressure to solve the case. The new information from Alex Carter provided valuable leads, but it also complicated the narrative, making it harder to distinguish between victim and perpetrator. Hayes knew that the truth lay somewhere within the tangled web of deceit and betrayal, and he was determined to unravel it. The investigation into Emily Parker's disappearance stretched on for months, with Detective Hayes and his team following every lead, no matter how tenuous. The case had become a national obsession, with the media closely monitoring every development. Public opinion was divided. Some believed David Reynolds was guilty of foul play, while others speculated that Emily had staged her own disappearance to escape a troubled marriage. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. A hiker in a remote part of St. Lucia discovered a makeshift campsite hidden in the dense jungle. Among the belongings were items that matched the descriptions of Emily's possessions, including a distinctive bracelet she was known to wear. The discovery reignited the investigation, with search teams scouring the area for further clues. Eventually, they found Emily. She was alive but severely dehydrated and disoriented. Emily had indeed staged her disappearance, driven by fear and desperation, after uncovering David's deceit and feeling trapped in the marriage. She had fled into the jungle, intending to disappear entirely, but the harsh conditions had taken a toll on her health. Emily's rescue brought a mix of relief and outrage. While many were glad she was safe, questions about her actions and the trauma she endured dominated the public discourse. Detective Hayes interviewed Emily extensively, piecing together her story. She described the mounting pressure she felt after discovering David's infidelities and financial troubles. The anonymous tip from Alex Carter had been the final straw, prompting her to take drastic action. David Reynolds was arrested and charged with multiple crimes, including fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit harm. The evidence provided by Alex Carter, combined with Emily's testimony, built a strong case against him. During the trial, the full extent of David's deceit was laid bare. His financial empire had been a house of cards, supported by lies and illegal activities. The jury found him guilty on all counts, and he was sentenced to 10 years in prison. The aftermath of the case left lasting scars on everyone involved. Emily returned to Maplewood, where she began the long process of healing with the support of her family and friends. She became an advocate for domestic abuse victims, sharing her story to help others in similar situations. The media's fascination with her life eventually faded, but Emily remained a symbol of resilience and survival. Detective Hayes reflected on the case as one of the most challenging of his career. It had been a journey through layers of deception and human frailty, revealing the dark complexities of love, trust, and betrayal. The resolution, while not entirely satisfying, brought a measure of justice and closure to those affected. In the end, the case of Emily Parker's disappearance was a stark reminder that truth can be stranger than fiction, and that beneath the surface of seemingly perfect lives, there can lie a twisted web of secrets waiting to be uncovered. John Anderson, a well-respected local businessman, was found dead under mysterious circumstances in his home. The news spread like wildfire, leaving the townspeople in shock and disbelief. John's body was discovered by his wife, Lisa Anderson, who called the police in a state of frantic distress. The scene that awaited the detectives was both perplexing and chilling. John lay motionless in the living room, with no visible signs of struggle or forced entry. The initial examination suggested a sudden and unexplained death, But something felt off to the seasoned investigators. Detective Sarah Miller and her partner, Detective James Carter, were assigned to the case. Both experienced and diligent, they knew that in a small town like Brooksville, everyone had their secrets, and sometimes those secrets could be deadly. As they began their investigation, the townsfolk watched with bated breath, eager to know what had happened to one of their own. Rumors began to swirl as the community speculated about the cause of John's untimely demise. Some whispered about his business dealings, while others hinted at personal troubles. Little did they know that the truth was far more sinister and tangled than they could ever imagine. As the detectives delved deeper into John's life and relationships, they uncovered a web of deceit, betrayal, and hidden motives that pointed to a shocking conclusion. John Anderson was a man of many facets. At 45, he had built a successful career as the owner of a local hardware store, Anderson's Supplies, which had been a staple in Brooksville for over 2 decades. Known for his generosity and commitment to the community, John was a beloved figure in town. He often donated to local charities and sponsored youth sports teams, earning him a reputation as a pillar of Brooksville society. Despite his public persona, those who knew John well were aware of his private struggles. His marriage to Lisa had been under strain for several years. The couple had met in college and married young, but over time the passion had waned, replaced by routine and occasional arguments. Friends described John as hardworking and dedicated, but also as someone who could be distant and absorbed in his work. John's last known activities painted a picture of a man entrenched in his routine. He had spent the previous day at his store, attending to customers and managing inventory. He left work at his usual time, stopped briefly at a local diner for a cup of coffee, and then headed home. Surveillance footage confirmed that he arrived at his house at 6:45 p.m. That evening, John had planned to spend a quiet night with Lisa, watching television and discussing their upcoming vacation. However, Lisa reported that John had complained of feeling unwell shortly after dinner. He had retired to the living room to rest, and that was the last time she saw him alive. When she went to check on him later, she found him unresponsive and called 911. The initial autopsy report was inconclusive. There were no obvious signs of trauma or foul play, and toxicology results were pending. Detectives Miller and Carter knew that they had to dig deeper into John's life to uncover any potential clues that could explain his sudden death. They began by interviewing Lisa and those closest to John, hoping to piece together the events leading up to that fateful night. Lisa Anderson was the picture of grief when the detectives first interviewed her. At 42, she was a striking woman with auburn hair and piercing blue eyes, now red-rimmed from crying. Her distress seemed genuine, but Miller and Carter knew better than to take things at face value. They needed to understand her relationship with John and her potential role in his death. Lisa worked as a marketing manager for a local real estate firm, a job she had taken up after their 2 children, Jake and Emily, went off to college. Described by friends as outgoing and charismatic, Lisa was well liked in the community. However, some noted that her marriage to John had been rocky. There were rumors of arguments and a growing emotional distance between them. When questioned about the night of John's death, Lisa recounted her version of events with a tremor in her voice. She described how John had complained of feeling ill after dinner and had decided to lie down in the living room. She had given him some space, thinking he needed rest, and had gone upstairs to read. Hours later, when she didn't hear from him, she went downstairs and found him unresponsive. Lisa's reaction to John's death was complex. She expressed deep sorrow and a sense of loss, but also hinted at frustrations that had simmered beneath the surface of their marriage. She admitted that they had been going through a rough patch, but she insisted that she loved John and had hoped to work through their issues. As the detectives delved deeper, they noticed subtle inconsistencies in Lisa's statements. She seemed hesitant when discussing certain aspects of her relationship with John, and there were moments when her grief appeared almost performative. Miller and Carter decided to explore further, focusing on Lisa's personal life and relationships outside her marriage. Their investigation soon led them to Mark Benson, Lisa's co-worker. Initial inquiries revealed that Lisa and Mark had been spending a lot of time together, both in and out of the office. The nature of their relationship raised eyebrows, and the detective suspected that there was more to the story than Lisa had let on. With this new lead, they began to unravel the threads of an affair that would cast a dark shadow over John's death and point to possible motives that were previously unseen. Detectives Miller and Carter arrived at the Anderson residence the morning after John's body was discovered. The house, a modest two-story home on Maple Street, was cordoned off with police tape. Forensic teams were already at work, meticulously combing through every inch of the property for clues. Miller, a seasoned detective with a keen eye for detail, started her examination in the living room where John's body had been found. The room was neat, almost eerily so. John lay on the couch, his face serene as if he were merely asleep. There were no signs of a struggle, no obvious wounds or marks on his body. The initial assessment by the medical examiner suggested that John had died of unknown causes, pending a full autopsy. Carter, Miller's partner, was outside speaking with the first responders. A burly man with a no-nonsense attitude, he had a knack for getting people to talk. He gathered statements from the paramedics and the patrol officers who had first arrived at the scene. None of them had seen anything out of the ordinary, and there were no immediate signs of forced entry or foul play. Inside, Miller turned her attention to Lisa, who sat at the kitchen table clutching a tissue. Lisa's hands trembled as she recounted the events of the previous night. Her story was consistent with what she had told the 911 operator. John had felt unwell, and she had left him to rest, only to find him unresponsive later. Miller noted the way Lisa's eyes darted around the room, avoiding direct contact. As they wrapped up their initial interviews, Miller and Carter spoke with several neighbors. Most described the Andersons as a quiet couple who kept to themselves. A few mentioned hearing arguments on occasion, but nothing that had raised significant alarm. One neighbor, Mrs. Evans, an elderly widow who lived next door, recalled seeing John the evening before. He had seemed his usual self, waving as he walked to his front door. Back at the station, the detectives reviewed their notes. They compiled a list of potential witnesses and persons of interest, starting with Lisa and expanding to friends, family, and co-workers. The preliminary evidence didn't point clearly in any direction, but Miller and Carter were determined to leave no stone unturned. Forensic analysis began to yield some results. The autopsy confirmed that John had not suffered from any external injuries. Toxicology tests, however, revealed trace amounts of a foreign substance in his system. This finding raised new questions about whether John's death was natural or if he had been deliberately poisoned. The detectives considered the possibility of an accidental overdose, but decided to focus on investigating any potential foul play. Meanwhile, Miller and Carter continued to scrutinize Lisa's behavior and background. They requested her phone records and financial statements, looking for any anomalies. Lisa's initial shock and sorrow seemed genuine, but the detectives knew that grief could mask many things. They needed to understand her motives, her relationships, and her state of mind in the weeks leading up to John's death. Their investigation soon took a critical turn when they discovered a series of text messages between Lisa and her coworker, Mark Benson. The messages hinted at a relationship that was far more intimate than just colleagues. This revelation provided a new perspective on the case and prompted the detectives to delve deeper into Lisa's affair with Mark, exploring how it might connect to John's untimely demise. The discovery of Lisa's affair with Mark Benson was a turning point in the investigation. The text messages between them were explicit and left little doubt about the nature of their relationship. Mark, a suave and charming man in his early 40s, worked with Lisa at the real estate firm, and it was clear that their connection went beyond professional boundaries. Detectives Miller and Carter decided to bring Lisa in for a second round of questioning. This time, they confronted her with the evidence of her affair. Lisa initially denied any wrongdoing, but when presented with the text messages, she broke down. Through tears, she admitted to the affair, claiming that it had started several months earlier. She insisted, however, that it had nothing to do with John's death. Lisa explained that she had felt lonely and unappreciated in her marriage. John had become increasingly distant, more focused on his business than on their relationship. She sought comfort and companionship in Mark, who was attentive and understanding. The affair had been an escape, a way for her to feel alive again, but she maintained that she had never wanted any harm to come to John. Miller and Carter knew that affairs could be powerful motivators for murder, but they needed more concrete evidence to link Lisa or Mark to John's death. They decided to bring Mark in for questioning. Mark was cooperative but nervous. He confirmed the affair, describing it as a whirlwind romance that had provided solace to both him and Lisa. He claimed that he had no knowledge of John's death and had been at home on the night it happened, a fact that they would need to verify. As the detectives delved deeper into the affair, they discovered that Lisa and Mark had been planning to start a new life together. Emails and further text messages revealed discussions about leaving Brooksville and moving to a different city. They had even looked into potential properties and job opportunities elsewhere. This painted a picture of a couple desperate to escape their current lives, raising further suspicions about their involvement in John's death. The affair added a layer of complexity to the case. Lisa's motive seemed clear. If she were free from her marriage, she could be with Mark without the stigma of divorce in their conservative community. However, Miller and Carter needed to establish a link between the affair and John's death. They began by re-examining the toxicology report, looking for any substances that could be traced back to Lisa or Mark. The detectives also started to scrutinize Mark's background more closely. They discovered that he had a history of financial troubles and had recently been involved in a legal dispute with a former employer. This revelation suggested that Mark might have had his own motives for wanting John out of the picture, particularly if he believed that Lisa could provide financial stability. With these new leads, Miller and Carter were determined to uncover the truth. They needed to build a case that connected the dots between the affair, the motives, and the opportunity for either Lisa or Mark to have orchestrated John's death. The stakes were high, and the pressure was mounting. But the detectives were resolute in their pursuit of justice. Mark Benson presented himself as a confident and composed individual. But under the scrutiny of the detectives, cracks began to appear in his facade. Mark was a real estate agent who had joined the same firm as Lisa a year prior. At 41, he was known for his charm and persuasive skills, which had earned him a reputation as one of the top agents in Brooksville. However, his personal life was far less stable. During his interview, Mark maintained that his relationship with Lisa was purely about mutual emotional support. He admitted to falling in love with her, but insisted that they had no plans to harm John. He claimed to have been at his apartment on the night of John's death, providing an alibi that the detectives would need to verify. As Miller and Carter dug into Mark's background, they found several red flags. Mark had moved to Brooksville after a series of failed business ventures in larger cities. He had accumulated significant debt and had been sued by a former business partner over a failed investment. Financial records showed that Mark was living beyond his means, struggling to keep up with his debts and maintain his lifestyle. Further investigation into Mark's phone records and emails revealed frequent, secretive communications with Lisa. They often discussed their dissatisfaction with their current lives and fantasized about a future together. In one particularly revealing email, Mark wrote about his desperation to start anew and his frustration with the obstacles in their way. While this was not direct evidence of a murder plot, it added to the narrative that he had a strong motive to eliminate John. The detectives also uncovered that Mark had recently taken out a sizable life insurance policy on himself, naming Lisa as the beneficiary. This discovery was particularly suspicious, suggesting that Mark might have been planning for a future that included financial security, possibly derived from Lisa's newfound widowhood. To verify Mark's alibi, Miller and Carter visited his apartment complex. The building manager confirmed that Mark had been seen entering his apartment around 7 p.m. on the night of John's death, but there were no witnesses to confirm his presence there for the entire evening. This left a window of opportunity that the detectives couldn't ignore. As they continued to interrogate Mark, his story began to show inconsistencies. He stumbled over details about his whereabouts and interactions with Lisa. Miller and Carter pressed harder, using psychological tactics to unsettle him. Mark's composure started to fray, and he became increasingly defensive. In a tense moment during questioning, Mark blurted out that Lisa had been the one to suggest they could be together sooner if John were out of the picture. This accusation shifted the focus back to Lisa and raised questions about who was truly orchestrating the events leading up to John's death. Was Mark trying to deflect blame, or was there a more sinister conspiracy at play? With both Lisa and Mark under intense scrutiny, the detectives faced the challenge of untangling a web of lies, motives, and opportunities. They needed more concrete evidence to determine whether one or both of them were responsible for John's death. As they continued their investigation, they hoped that the next piece of the puzzle would bring them closer to the truth. As the investigation progressed, Miller and Carter encountered numerous twists and turns that complicated the case. New evidence surfaced, leading them down unexpected paths and challenging their initial assumptions. Each revelation brought them closer to the truth, but also raised more questions. One such twist came when the toxicology report was finalized. The foreign substance found in John's system was identified as a rare, fast-acting poison. This poison was not something one could easily acquire, pointing to a premeditated act rather than an accidental overdose. The detectives now had concrete evidence that John's death was a murder, and they needed to find out who had access to such a substance. Their inquiries led them to a local pharmacy where the poison had been purchased. The pharmacist remembered selling the substance to a man matching Mark's description, but there was no solid proof linking Mark directly to the purchase. This added another layer of suspicion, but was not enough to make an arrest. While following up on the lead at the pharmacy, the detectives received an anonymous tip. The caller claimed to have seen Lisa meeting with a man in a secluded park shortly before John's death. This information suggested that Lisa might have been plotting something clandestine, possibly involving Mark. The detectives traced the call, but found that it originated from a disposable phone, making it impossible to identify the source. Simultaneously, a surprising piece of evidence emerged from John's business dealings. Financial records indicated that John had recently transferred a significant sum of money to an unknown account. Further investigation revealed that this account belonged to a private investigator named Alex Thompson. When questioned, Thompson disclosed that John had hired him to follow Lisa, suspecting her of infidelity. This revelation painted a picture of a man who was not only aware of his wife's affair, but also taking steps to gather evidence. The private investigator's report included photos and detailed logs of Lisa's meetings with Mark. These documents confirmed the affair, but also contained troubling information about Lisa's behavior. According to Thompson, Lisa had been acting erratically in recent weeks, frequently discussing her unhappiness and expressing anger towards John. In one recorded conversation, she mentioned feeling trapped and hinted at wanting to escape her marriage by any means necessary. This new evidence prompted Miller and Carter to reevaluate their approach. They decided to conduct a thorough search of the Anderson home, hoping to find something that might link Lisa or Mark directly to the murder. During the search, they discovered a hidden compartment in Lisa's closet, containing vials of the same rare poison found in John's system. This discovery was damning and suggested Lisa's direct involvement in the crime. Confronted with this evidence, Lisa's demeanor shifted. She became defensive and hostile, accusing the detectives of trying to frame her. She insisted that she had no knowledge of the poison and that someone must have planted it to incriminate her. However, just as the detectives felt they were closing in on a resolution, another twist emerged. Mark Benson came forward with new information, claiming that Lisa had manipulated him into helping her acquire the poison. He provided emails and messages in which Lisa discussed her plan to poison John, making it appear as though Mark was a reluctant accomplice rather than the mastermind. With conflicting stories from Lisa and Mark, Miller and Carter faced a complex challenge. They needed to determine who was telling the truth and who was orchestrating a cover-up. The investigation had revealed a tangled web of deceit, motives, and opportunities, but the exact sequence of events leading to John's death remained elusive. Conversely, Mark's narrative painted him as a pawn in Lisa's scheme. He described how Lisa had gradually introduced the idea of poisoning John, making it seem like a desperate measure to free herself from an unbearable situation. He admitted to helping her obtain the poison, but insisted that he had never intended for John to die. His portrayal of Lisa as the mastermind added another layer of complexity to the case. To uncover the truth, the detectives decided to conduct a final round of intense interrogations. They hoped to catch one or both suspects in a lie, or reveal inconsistencies that could break the case wide open. Miller and Carter knew that the key to solving the murder lay in understanding the true nature of the relationship between Lisa and Mark and the depth of their motives. In a tense interview, Lisa finally broke down. She admitted that she had felt trapped in her marriage and saw no way out other than eliminating John. However, she insisted that Mark had been an active participant, encouraging her to go through with the plan. Her confession provided crucial insight into her state of mind and her willingness to commit murder to achieve her goals. With this new information, the detectives turned their attention back to Mark. They confronted him with Lisa's confession, hoping to provoke a reaction. Mark, realizing that his attempts to deflect blame were failing, began to unravel. He confessed to helping Lisa, but maintained that she had manipulated him from the start. The confessions from both suspects provided a clearer picture of the motives and events leading up to John's death. The detectives now had to piece together the final puzzle and determine how to proceed with arrests and charges, ensuring that justice would be served. The breakthrough in the case came when the detectives re-examined the timeline and physical evidence one last time. They discovered a crucial piece of evidence that had initially been overlooked, a security camera from a neighbor's house that captured a portion of the Andersons' backyard. The footage revealed Mark entering the Anderson home on the night of John's death, contradicting his alibi and providing a direct link between him and the crime scene. The jury deliberated for several days before returning a guilty verdict for both Lisa and Mark. Lisa was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, while Mark received a slightly lesser sentence due to his perceived secondary role in the crime. The community of Brooksville was left to grapple with the aftermath of the tragedy, but there was a sense of closure as justice had been served. The quiet town of Greenfield was shaken to its core when the body of Jack Thompson was discovered in his modest home on the outskirts of town. Jack, a well-liked middle-aged man known for his generosity and calm demeanor, had recently gone through a tumultuous divorce from his wife, Layla. The divorce, finalized just months prior, had left Jack visibly strained, but no one could have anticipated the tragic end he would meet. Layla Thompson, once the high school sweetheart and longtime partner of Jack, had quickly moved on after their split. She found solace in Derek Stone, a charismatic yet troubled man with a shadowy past. Derek, a former convict with a history of violent offenses, had swept Layla off her feet, bringing a sense of danger and excitement into her life that she had never experienced before. The discovery of Jack's lifeless body under suspicious circumstances set off a whirlwind investigation that uncovered a tangled web of deceit, betrayal, and revenge. The love triangle between Jack, Layla, and Derek became the focal point of the investigation, revealing dark secrets and motives that lay hidden beneath the surface. Greenfield's local police force, led by Detective Sarah Lawson, was tasked with untangling the complex relationships and finding the truth behind Jack's untimely death. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that this was not just a simple case of a crime of passion, but a meticulously planned act of vengeance. In the weeks that followed, the town would witness shocking revelations and unexpected twists, as the true nature of the relationships between Jack, Layla, and Derek came to light. The line between victim and perpetrator blurred, leaving everyone to wonder who could be trusted and who was hiding the darkest secrets. Jack and Layla Thompson's marriage had once been the epitome of stability and love. They had met in high school, their romance blossoming over the years into a marriage that seemed unbreakable. Jack, a kind-hearted man with a steady job as a schoolteacher, had always been the rock in their relationship. Layla, a nurse at the local hospital, complemented his steadiness with her nurturing and compassionate nature. However, as the years passed, the spark in their relationship began to fade. The stresses of daily life, combined with their inability to have children, placed a strain on their marriage. Layla's desire for excitement and change grew, leading her to seek solace outside their relationship. This quest for something new ultimately led her to Derek Stone. Derek Stone was a man with a troubled past. He had spent several years in prison for armed robbery and assault, but upon his release, he had vowed to turn his life around. His rugged good looks and charm quickly won Layla over, offering her the thrill and unpredictability she craved. Derek's presence in her life provided a stark contrast to the stability she had known with Jack. The affair between Layla and Derek was passionate and intense, leading to the eventual breakdown of her marriage to Jack. The divorce was bitter, with accusations and recriminations flying from both sides. Jack was devastated, unable to comprehend how the woman he had loved for so long could betray him in such a manner. Layla, on the other hand, felt liberated, ready to start a new chapter with Derek. Despite his attempts to move on, Jack found it difficult to let go of the past. He remained deeply in love with Layla, his heart aching at the thought of her with another man. His friends and colleagues noticed the change in him, his once cheerful demeanor replaced by a quiet sadness. Jack's attempts to rekindle his relationship with Layla were met with hostility, further deepening his despair. Derek, meanwhile, harbored his own grudges. He resented Jack for the hold he still seemed to have over Layla, and his violent tendencies began to resurface. Derek's jealousy and possessiveness became more pronounced, leading to frequent arguments with Layla. Despite this, Layla remained committed to Derek, convinced that their love was worth the turmoil. As the months passed, the tension between Jack, Layla, and Derek grew, setting the stage for the tragic events that were about to unfold. The love triangle, fraught with jealousy and resentment, would soon explode in a manner that would shock the entire town of Greenfield and leave a trail of devastation in its wake. The crisp autumn morning was shattered by the piercing scream of Mrs. Henderson, Jack's elderly neighbor, as she discovered his lifeless body sprawled across the living room floor. She had come over to check on Jack after noticing that his mail had piled up over the past few days. Her concern quickly turned to horror as she stumbled upon the gruesome scene. The local police were called immediately, and within minutes Detective Sarah Lawson and her team arrived at the scene. The sight that greeted them was both disturbing and puzzling. Jack's body lay in a pool of blood, his face contorted in a grimace of pain. There were signs of a violent struggle, with furniture overturned and broken glass scattered across the floor. As the forensic team began their meticulous work, Detective Lawson interviewed Mrs. Henderson. The elderly woman, still visibly shaken, recounted her discovery and her interactions with Jack in the days leading up to his death. She mentioned hearing raised voices coming from Jack's house a few nights before, but she had assumed it was just another argument between him and Layla. Layla and Derek were quickly brought in for questioning. Layla appeared distraught, her eyes red from crying. Derek, on the other hand, was stoic, his expression unreadable. Detective Lawson noted the stark contrast between the two, her instincts telling her that there was more to their story than met the eye. Layla recounted her last interaction with Jack. She claimed that she had not seen him for several days, and that their last conversation had been about finalizing the sale of their former home. Derek corroborated Layla's account, stating that they had spent the night of Jack's death at his apartment, miles away from the crime scene. Despite their alibis, Detective Lawson couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She ordered a thorough search of Derek's apartment and began to dig deeper into his past. The initial results of the forensic analysis pointed towards a struggle, with Jack having put up a significant fight against his attacker. There were signs of blunt force trauma to his head, suggesting that he had been struck multiple times with a heavy object. The discovery of a bloodied baseball bat in Jack's garage further complicated the investigation. The bat had Jack's fingerprints on it, but there were also smudges that suggested someone else had handled it. Detective Lawson sent the bat to the lab for further analysis, hoping it would provide a crucial lead. The townspeople of Greenfield were abuzz with speculation. Theories ranged from a robbery gone wrong to a crime of passion. Jack's friends and colleagues were interviewed, painting a picture of a man who was deeply troubled but not without enemies. Layla and Derek's tumultuous relationship became a focal point of the investigation, with many suspecting that their involvement went beyond just an affair. Detective Lawson knew that unraveling the truth behind Jack's death would require piecing together the fragmented lives of the people involved. The love triangle between Jack, Layla, and Derek was fraught with complexities, and she was determined to uncover every hidden detail, no matter how dark or disturbing. The investigation into Jack Thompson's murder began in earnest, with Detective Sarah Lawson leading the charge. Her first step was to establish a timeline of events leading up to Jack's death. She and her team interviewed neighbors, friends, and family, piecing together the last known movements of Jack, Layla, and Derek. The neighbors provided a wealth of information. Several had heard loud arguments coming from Jack's house in the days before his death. One neighbor, Mr. Parker, reported seeing a shadowy figure lurking around Jack's property late at night, although he couldn't provide a clear description. Another neighbor, Mrs. Green, mentioned seeing Layla leave Jack's house in a hurry the day before his body was found. Detective Lawson interviewed Layla's colleagues at the hospital, who described her as a dedicated nurse, but noted that she had become increasingly distracted and agitated in recent months. One colleague, Susan, recalled Layla confiding in her about the stress of her divorce and her volatile relationship with Derek. Susan mentioned that Layla had expressed fear for her safety on several occasions, hinting at Derek's violent tendencies. The investigation also delved into Derek's background. Detective Lawson discovered that Derek had a history of violence and had been in and out of prison for various offenses, including assault and armed robbery. She interviewed some of Derek's former associates, who painted a picture of a man prone to explosive outbursts and a deep-seated need for control. One former associate, Mike, mentioned that Derek had often talked about exacting revenge on anyone who wronged him. Despite Derek's troubling past, his alibi for the night of Jack's murder seemed solid. However, Detective Lawson couldn't ignore the mounting evidence that suggested he had a motive for wanting Jack out of the picture. The discovery of Jack's blood on Derek's shoes, found during the search of his apartment, further fueled her suspicions. Layla's inconsistent statements also raised red flags. During her initial interview, she had claimed not to have seen Jack for days. However, Mrs. Green's account contradicted this, placing Layla at Jack's house the day before his death. When confronted with this discrepancy, Layla became defensive, insisting that she had only gone to collect some personal belongings and had left after a brief argument. As the investigation progressed, Detective Lawson uncovered a series of text messages between Layla and Derek that suggested they had discussed plans to confront Jack about his continued interference in their relationship. The messages hinted at a growing frustration with Jack and a desire to put an end to the constant conflict. Despite the mounting evidence, the case was far from straightforward. Detective Lawson knew that she needed more concrete proof to build a solid case against Derek and Layla. She ordered a thorough analysis of the crime scene, hoping to find forensic evidence that would link them directly to Jack's murder. The community of Greenfield watched anxiously as the investigation unfolded. The once quiet town was now the center of a media frenzy, with reporters flocking to cover the sensational story. The pressure on Detective Lawson and her team was immense, but she remained steadfast in her determination to uncover the truth and bring justice to Jack Thompson. As the investigation into Jack Thompson's murder deepened, suspicions surrounding Layla and Derek grew more pronounced. Detective Lawson and her team scrutinized every detail, piecing together the puzzle that seemed to implicate both Layla and Derek in Jack's death. Layla's behavior became increasingly erratic. Her initial grief gave way to a defensive and hostile attitude during subsequent interviews. When questioned about her presence at Jack's house, she provided conflicting accounts, further muddying the waters. Her colleagues at the hospital noted her frequent absences and whispered conversations on her phone, fueling speculation about her involvement in something sinister. Detective Lawson also focused on Derek's suspicious behavior. Despite his alibi, there were inconsistencies that couldn't be ignored. Derek had claimed to be at his apartment on the night of the murder, but surveillance footage from a nearby gas station showed his car on the road during the time frame in question. The footage, though grainy, provided enough evidence to warrant further investigation. The discovery of Jack's blood on Derek's shoes was a significant breakthrough. Forensic analysis confirmed that the blood matched Jack's, placing Derek at the crime scene. When confronted with this evidence, Derek's composure cracked. He denied any involvement, claiming that he had been framed, but his increasingly erratic behavior only deepened Detective Lawson's suspicions. Layla's phone records revealed a series of heated exchanges between her and Derek in the days leading up to Jack's murder. The messages hinted at a plan to confront Jack and put an end to the constant turmoil he was causing in their lives. The tone of the messages grew more aggressive, with Derek urging Layla to take decisive action. One particular message stood out. Derek had texted Layla the night before the murder, saying, "It's time we take care of this once and for all." Layla's response was cryptic, but seemed to indicate her agreement. The messages provided a chilling glimpse into the escalating tension between the three individuals. Detective Lawson's team also uncovered financial records that revealed Layla had recently taken out a substantial life insurance policy on Jack. The policy, worth a significant amount, named Layla as the sole beneficiary. The timing of the policy raised eyebrows, suggesting a possible financial motive for Jack's murder. As the evidence mounted, Detective Lawson knew she needed a confession to solidify the case. She decided to apply pressure on Layla, hoping to exploit the cracks in her story. During a tense interrogation, Layla finally broke down. She admitted to visiting Jack's house the day before his death, but insisted that she had left before anything happened. She claimed that Derek had become increasingly unhinged, pressuring her to cut all ties with Jack. Detective Lawson also interviewed Derek's former associates again, this time focusing on his violent tendencies and potential motive. Mike, the former associate who had mentioned Derek's penchant for revenge, revealed that Derek had often spoken about wanting to eliminate anyone who threatened his relationship with Layla. Despite the mounting evidence against Derek, the investigation faced a critical juncture. Detective Lawson needed concrete proof to link Derek directly to the crime. She ordered a comprehensive search of Derek's apartment, hoping to uncover the final piece of the puzzle that would bring justice to Jack Thompson. As the investigation into Jack Thompson's murder continued, Detective Sarah Lawson delved deeper into Derek Stone's past. The more she uncovered, the more it became clear that Derek was a man with a history of violence and a potential for revenge. Derek's criminal record revealed a series of offenses dating back to his teenage years. He had been involved in gang activities, petty thefts, and assaults. His most serious conviction, however, was for armed robbery, which had landed him in prison for several years. During his incarceration, Derek had been involved in multiple altercations with other inmates, further highlighting his violent tendencies. Detective Lawson interviewed some of Derek's former associates, hoping to gain insight into his behavior and motives. Mike, the associate who had previously hinted at Derek's vengeful nature, provided a chilling account of Derek's time in prison. According to Mike, Derek had developed a reputation for being ruthless and unforgiving, often targeting those who crossed him or posed a threat. One former associate, Steve, recounted a particularly disturbing incident. Derek had been involved in a violent altercation with another inmate who had insulted him. The fight had left the inmate severely injured, and Derek had shown no remorse. Steve described Derek as a man who thrived on control and power, traits that had only intensified during his time behind bars. Detective Lawson also discovered that Derek had a history of unstable relationships. His ex-girlfriend, Lisa, came forward with her own harrowing account of their time together. Lisa described Derek as charming and attentive at first, but his demeanor quickly changed. He became possessive and abusive, isolating her from friends and family. She eventually managed to escape the relationship, but remained fearful of Derek's potential for violence. Lisa's account provided further insight into Derek's character. She mentioned that Derek had often spoken about his desire for revenge against anyone who wronged him. He harbored deep-seated grudges and was willing to go to great lengths to settle scores. Detective Lawson realized that Derek's relationship with Layla and his resentment towards Jack fit this pattern perfectly. Armed with this new information, Detective Lawson intensified her efforts to find concrete evidence linking Derek to Jack's murder. She ordered a comprehensive search of Derek's apartment, hoping to uncover any items that could connect him to the crime scene. The search yielded several pieces of potential evidence, including a set of keys that matched the locks on Jack's house and a blood-stained shirt hidden in the back of Derek's closet. Forensic analysis confirmed that the blood on the shirt matched Jack's, providing a direct link between Derek and the crime. This discovery was a significant breakthrough, but Detective Lawson knew that it was not enough on its own to secure a conviction. She needed a confession or additional evidence to solidify the case. Detective Lawson decided to confront Derek with the new evidence, hoping to elicit a reaction. During the interrogation, Derek's composure began to crack. He vehemently denied any involvement, but his increasingly erratic behavior suggested otherwise. Layla, who had been brought in for questioning once again, appeared visibly shaken when confronted with the evidence against Derek. In a desperate bid to save herself, Layla began to distance herself from Derek. She claimed that he had manipulated her and that she had been too afraid to leave him. Layla's statements, while self-serving, provided further insight into the toxic and volatile nature of their relationship. Detective Lawson knew she was close to unraveling the truth, but she needed one final push to bring the case to its conclusion. As the investigation reached its critical juncture, new evidence and unexpected revelations added further complexity to the case. Detective Sarah Lawson and her team were determined to untangle the web of deceit that surrounded Jack Thompson's murder. One of the most significant breakthroughs came from an unexpected source. A former inmate who had shared a cell with Derek, named Tony, came forward with crucial information. Tony revealed that Derek had confided in him about his plan to get rid of Jack. According to Tony, Derek had expressed his frustration with Jack's continued presence in Layla's life and had boasted about his intention to eliminate the problem once and for all. Tony's account added weight to the theory that Derek had premeditated the murder. He provided specific details that matched the evidence found at the crime scene, including the use of the baseball bat as the murder weapon. Tony's testimony was a game-changer, providing the corroboration Detective Lawson needed to build a solid case against Derek. However, the investigation took an unexpected turn when Layla's secret was uncovered. Detective Lawson's team discovered a series of hidden bank accounts in Layla's name, containing large sums of money that she had been siphoning off over the past few years. This revelation raised questions about Layla's true motives and her potential involvement in the murder. Layla's financial records revealed that she had been planning to leave Derek and start a new life. She had been saving money in secret, waiting for the right moment to make her escape. This newfound information painted a different picture of Layla, suggesting that she might have had her own reasons for wanting Jack out of the way. Detective Lawson confronted Layla with the evidence of the hidden bank accounts. Layla broke down, admitting that she had been trapped in a toxic and abusive relationship with Derek. She confessed that she had feared for her life and had been planning to escape, but insisted that she had no involvement in Jack's murder. Layla claimed that Derek had acted alone, driven by his own jealous rage. As the investigation unfolded, another twist emerged. A third party, previously unknown to the investigators, was discovered to have had contact with both Layla and Derek. This individual, named Ryan, was a former colleague of Derek's from his criminal days. Ryan had recently been released from prison and had reconnected with Derek. Detective Lawson brought Ryan in for questioning, hoping to uncover his role in the case. Ryan admitted to meeting with Derek and Layla on several occasions, but denied any involvement in the murder. However, his statements were inconsistent, and his nervous demeanor suggested that he was hiding something. The investigation took a dramatic turn when Ryan's fingerprints were found on the baseball bat used to kill Jack. Under intense interrogation, Ryan finally cracked. He confessed that Derek had enlisted his help in carrying out the murder, promising him a share of the life insurance money that Layla had taken out on Jack. Ryan revealed that Derek had planned every detail, from the initial confrontation to the disposal of evidence. Ryan's confession provided the missing piece of the puzzle, implicating both Derek and himself in the murder. Layla's role remained murky, but the evidence suggested that she had been a pawn in Derek's twisted game. Detective Lawson knew that the case was far from straightforward, but she was determined to bring those responsible to justice. With Ryan's confession in hand, Detective Sarah Lawson prepared for the final confrontation. She knew that Derek Stone would not go down without a fight, and she braced herself for a tense and potentially dangerous encounter. Detective Lawson and her team planned a coordinated effort to arrest Derek. They decided to approach him at his apartment, where he had been staying with Layla. The element of surprise was crucial, as they anticipated that Derek might attempt to flee or react violently. On the day of the operation, the team moved swiftly and efficiently. Detective Lawson knocked on Derek's door, her heart pounding with anticipation. Derek answered, his expression a mix of surprise and defiance. Detective Lawson presented the evidence and Ryan's confession, informing Derek that he was under arrest for the murder of Jack Thompson. Derek's reaction was immediate and explosive. He lunged at Detective Lawson, shouting accusations and threats. The officers quickly subdued him, but not before Derek managed to land a few blows. His resistance only served to reinforce the image of a violent and unstable individual, further sealing his fate. As Derek was taken into custody, Layla was brought in for questioning once again. The revelation of Ryan's involvement had shaken her, and she seemed genuinely terrified of Derek. Layla insisted that she had been unaware of the full extent of Derek's plan, and that she had never intended for Jack to be harmed. Despite Layla's claims, the evidence suggested that she had at least some knowledge of Derek's intentions. Detective Lawson pressed her for details, hoping to unravel the final threads of the case. Under intense questioning, Layla admitted that she had suspected Derek was planning something, but had been too afraid to confront him. The climax of the investigation came when Derek, now facing the reality of his situation, decided to cut a deal. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he agreed to provide a full confession and implicate Layla in the planning of the murder. Derek's confession was chilling, detailing the calculated and cold-blooded manner in which he had orchestrated Jack's death. Derek revealed that he had manipulated Layla into taking out the life insurance policy on Jack, promising her a future free from financial worries. He had then enlisted Ryan's help, using his former associate's desperation and loyalty to carry out the crime. Derek admitted that he had been driven by jealousy and a desire for control, unable to tolerate Jack's continued presence in Layla's life. Layla, confronted with Derek's confession, broke down completely. She admitted to her role in the plan, though she maintained that she had never intended for Jack to be killed. Her fear of Derek and her desire for freedom had clouded her judgment, leading her down a dark and tragic path. With both Derek and Layla in custody, the case against them was solid. The legal proceedings moved swiftly, with Derek receiving a life sentence for his role as the mastermind behind the murder. Layla, though complicit, received a lesser sentence due to her cooperation and the evidence of her abusive relationship with Derek. The town of Greenfield, though forever changed by the events, found a renewed sense of unity and resilience. The legacy of Jack Thompson lived on, a reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of seeking justice for those who could no longer speak for themselves.